What's up? Ghost Fictions is here, and we're back again. This is the second part of a story where Issei was betrayed and fused with Ophis. But before we start, please consider subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Don't forget to check the description for more informations. Now, let's get into part 2. There are quite a few gods in Greek mythology, but the main ones, the Olympic gods, are as follows: Zeus, Hera, Athena, Apollo, Poseidon, Ares, Artemis, Demeter, Aphrodite, Dionysus, Hermes, and Hephaestus. He turned around to walk back to his desk. All of the students were giving him quite a range of emotion. Some of them were taking notes as if they didn't care he was one of the perverted trio, some just sat there staring at him in shock. Murayama and Kata sat in their desks while gaping at him while Kiryu was blushing. Oh yeah. She is the female version of Motohama, able to tell how big a man can be at full mast with a single glance. Of course, she would be blushing. Not many humans have a cock 9 inches long and 2 inches thick from east to west and north to south. Very good, Issei. Can you come back and tell us what they are the gods of? Suppressing a sigh, the boy turned around and once again began writing on the board next to the names he wrote previously. Zeus is the king of the Olympic gods and the god of thunder, making him one of strongest of the Greek mythology. Hera is the queen and the goddess of marriage and family, representing the ideal woman. Athena, war and wisdom. Apollo, bow, music, divination. Poseidon, the sea, rivers, and most things water. Ares, war. Artemis, hunting, all things wild, and chastity. Demeter, fertility of the land. Aphrodite, love, beauty, and all things sexual. Dionysus, alcohol, specifically wine, and theater. Hermes, trade, wealth, and thieves. Hephaestus, fire, metallurgy, and crafts. Little known fact about this one is that she is actually a female, unlike how the legends describe her. Once again, shocked silence. This time, he was allowed to return to his seat without interruption. It took several minutes before class started back up again. There was one difference though. Issei had taken out another sheet of paper, folded it into 3, and starting writing on it. After the last bell rang signaling the end of class for the day, 2 people quickly made their way to his desk. One was wearing glasses and had medium-length brown hair, while the other had a shaved head that was showing signs of hair coming back. "Hey man, welcome back to the world of the living," Mitsuda told him while clapping him on the back, failing to notice the look of annoyance on their friend's face. It seemed that they thought absolutely nothing of his performance earlier. "The king hasn't been the same since you have been gone," Motohama commented, a perverted smirk on his face, eager to tell his companion about their exploits. "We can fill you in later after we get done looking at the girls get dressed for their clubs." This did not fail in drawing anger from almost all of the girls in the room, finding the act disgusting and creepy, not wanting their bodies to be seen by such indecent individuals. No thanks," Issei told the 2 of them much to their surprise. "I have better things to do with my time." What do you mean better things?" Mitsuda exclaimed in an overly exaggerated manner. "We are the perverted trio, man. You can't just ditch us. We got a new hidden spot perfect for peeking. You can't turn that up." "I can and will," was the boy's reply, finding that his gut was starting to churn. Was he really like this before? Dear Ophis, no wonder the girls hated his guts back then. Secondly, the dragon stood from the wooden structure that held him up and walked across the class. The other kids, seeing the direction he was taking, couldn't help but follow him with their eyes as he approached the 2 girls who hated his guts more than any other girl in class. Murayama, seeing his approach, nudged Cadis with her elbow and motioned to him with her head. Now having the full attention of everyone in class, as well as the 2 girls he had business with, the room was dead silent, just as it had been many times today. "What do you want, perv?" Murayama almost growled, her sharp nails digging into her palms as she clenched her fists. It was obvious she wanted to say more, but the teacher was still in the room, keeping an eye on them in case conflict started. But that out of the way, Issei held out the second piece of paper he had been working on today. "Read it." "Why the hell should I?" "Hey. Language." Murayama shrank under the harsh tone of the person in charge of this class. Seeing as her friend had no intentions of doing so, Cadis reached for the paper. While she held similar feelings towards him, her curiosity was getting the better of her. This was the first time one of the perverted trio had approached them so openly like this. Also, according to the rumors, something was off about the boy in front of them. Now standing before the 2, Cadis had to agree, there was something different about him. She just couldn't place what it was. "Aloud please." Both of their eyes narrowed in suspicion. Cadis read aloud, while Murayama quietly read over her shoulder. "I, Issei Haidu of the Student Council, issue a challenge to the entirety of the Kendo Club. The challenge is a 1 versus all Kendo match. All available members of the aforementioned club are to participate in a no-holds-barred match, where one Issei Haidu will attempt to defeat every single member of the Kendo club. There will be one bout where the entirety of the Kendo club will face Issei Haidu in a 1 vs all Kendo match. Should Issei Haidu have blood drawn, it will be the Kendo club's victory. All members of the perverted trio will cease their inappropriate actions towards all female students. Should Issei Haidu repel all opponents or force them to surrender, it shall be Issei Haidu's victory, and all members of the perverted trio will cease their inappropriate actions towards all female students, and one Murayama Mamoru and one Kadis Hayu will be required to meet Issei Haidu at an undisclosed location at an undisclosed time to perform an undisclosed act. Note: nothing sexual will be expected from the aforementioned members above. As expected, total silence fell once more. Not a single student was brave enough to so much as peep, not when both of the girls were literally burning with a murderous aura. What the fucking hell is this supposed to be? Murayama shouted at him, pulling her arm back in an attempt to slap him. It wasn't allowed to finish. Just as her hand was about to impact his cheek, Issei struck first. The overreaching appendage was blocked with the exact same motion Murayama had attempted to do. Issei's arm was snug against hers with his palm mere inches away from her face. The message was clear. Not only did he stop her from slapping him, he could have very easily followed through and smacked her instead with the same arm that blocked her. "You should be happy," he told the angry pair. "No matter who wins, no one will be peeking on you. Not only that, but you have a change to make me bleed. Isn't that what all girls in your club want?" Issei was content with what had just happened. Murayama won't take this lying down, and Kadis won't forgive him for almost hitting a girl. They would get their club members and they would be looking for blood, while Issei would see if he could draw out signs of their sacred gears. "Perfect. Meet me in the front courtyard in 2 hours. That should be enough for you to get everyone right." Waving at the two of them, Issei attempted to walk out the door before something grabbed his left hand. Looking down at his caught appendage, he saw a girl with green eyes and brown hair a shade lighter than Murayama's looking up at him. Well, Issei, looks like you are determined to stir up as much trouble as possible on your first day back." "Not really," was his response. "It isn't like they will just say okay if I was them to do something. Now they have a chance to turn me into a bloody mess and they won't get in trouble for it." "Yeah, sounds good." Why did she sound like she didn't care whatsoever? "What is my attention are these rings on ring finger? What do they mean?" The other students snapping out of their stupor, they also took a look at the hand that Kiryu was holding. It was true. Issei's left ring finger had on 3 identical purple bands made of genuine ivory and amethyst, all of them carved to look like a snake eating its own tail. "What do you mean? What do they mean?" "Everyone knows that having a ring on your left ring finger means you are married." "There are 3 because I have 3 wives." The entire classroom erupted. "What? Prelude to conflict. What the fuck do you mean you're married?" Mitsuda exclaimed, feet pounding against the tile until 2 hands were clasped against the dragon's head. The boy just stood there after grabbing him, the most prominent of glares on his face, but Mitsuda didn't really do much of anything else. "What is this human doing?" the original dragon god asked her host, confused as to why a male was grasping Issei's temples. "Probably trying to squeeze my temples." Despite his scrawny appearance, he is somewhat knowledgeable when it comes to causing pain. He is a closet sadist after all. The dragon couldn't help but feel a vague amusement at the action. A human trying to cause harm to a dragon. Unless he had a sacred gear that not even Ophis could detect or was secretly a descendant of Hercules, there wasn't a snowball's chance in hell. That isn't possible. Seeing a chance to express his rage and dissatisfaction, Motomaha jumped into the verbal fray. "You're just a teenager. Do you actually expect us to believe you have 3 wives? And why in the world are you trying to stop us from peeping? I won't have it. My perverted needs won't be satisfied until I see every single of them. Nah." "Shut up." Issei's amusement snuffed out, the frozen voice silenced the perverted fool who dared to proclaim such vulgar content in the middle of a classroom. "Just a teenager. You could not fathom what I have gone through since I started attending this school. I have been through too much to let you stand there and look down on me of all people." If anyone was wondering what the reason was for his sudden change in attitude, the bone-chilling fear permeating the air did not permit the students to voice it. The perverted duo stood in terror, Mitsuda releasing the boy between his hands in favor of retreating to the safety of his comrade. "Issei, we have been over this. Dragons are prideful creatures and do not take well to slights. You need to control yourself so you don't do something you will regret." It took some time for a deep calming exhale exited his lips. Issei had effectively silenced not only his former friends, but the classroom had seemed to take a step back from the very unexpected outburst. It was natural to expect a reaction to this degree, and he did, but that didn't make the words any less unpleasant to listen to. True, teenagers didn't normally get married, much less to 3 wives, however, since when was Issei a normal teenager? What other child his age was turned to a devil, fought in what could be considered war simulations, died numerous times, fought to the death against gods and dragons, and is now one of the strongest being in all of creation? The answer to that question? No one. My little boy is one of a kind. Ophis purred inside of his mind, earning a small blush at the erotic tone. The red hue growing on his face seemed to remove the cold atmosphere that had been in the room, however, there was one person who didn't seem to be affected at all by his sudden lashing of the 2 perverts. Oh, now isn't this a juicy scoop? A girl with glasses and beige hair styled in twin tails that went to her upper bust stepped forward. One of the perverted trio getting married to not only 1, but 3 chicks. I wonder, how did someone like you manage to accomplish something like that? That is, if this story isn't a lie. That was the question everyone wanted answered. The men all had their own perverted tendencies and tastes, but not a single one of them were as vocal about their kinks as the perverted trio. How did someone who was a well-known pervert who frequently performed questionable acts manage to get married in the first place, let alone to 3 different women? Who even were these mystery wives and what did they look like? The girls were having similar thoughts, Murayama and Caddis particularly. Almost all of the girls thought of Issei as a perverted creep that did nothing but stare at them indecently, imagine them naked, and try to peek on them while they were changing for their various clubs. The only person who seemed to be exempt from the perverted trio's corrupt tendencies was Kiryu, and that was only because she acted like them from time to time. You know. Issei started, causing everyone to lean forward. I almost died in that gas explosion I told you about this morning. As my life was fading, time seemed to slow down, images of my life flashing through my eyes. How was I going to accomplish being a harem king by behaving the way I was? Is being a harem king even worth it? Certainly, it didn't seem like that was the case when I was dying. Eventually, I passed out from the pain and when I woke up, I saw 2 girls. I was surprised that I even woke up again, let alone in a small house with 2 chicks sitting over me. When I asked one of them what had happened, she said that they saved my life. I didn't know what to do to thank any of them for saving me. When I mustered up the courage to ask the 3 why they decided to save me, 2 of them asked for children, while the other asked for peace and quiet. I was shocked at first, honestly, why wouldn't I be? No normal girl just asks a stranger to knock them up. Don't get me wrong, I was happy that a girl wanted me to have sex with her, but to just give them a child and call it even. My pride wouldn't let me do it. So, I told both of them no, and that I would only have a child with the person who was going to be my wife. Both of them said they understood and have been working on building their relationship with me ever since. It didn't take long for us to realize that we saw ourselves in each other, and we got to the point where I began to question if I was ready to devote myself to a permanent relationship with one of them. I mean, I almost died a while ago. If something like that happens again, what will people remember me by? A complete jerk who was an open pervert and made lots of people uncomfortable. I'll be damned if that is all I left this world with. On top of all of that, I developed strong and genuine feelings for not one, but both of them. So, I steeled myself and told the both of them that they either share me or no one gets me. Thus, these. The motion to the multi-ringed finger for those who had yet to see it. The fake story that was cooked up to explain his absence caused the entire to stare at him in silence, quieted by the tale he spun for them. Whether it was true or not, everyone had their opinion of him changed whether they liked it or not. If he was truly married, he wouldn't be peeking on the girls anymore, and he would not be as openly perverted and giving men a bad name, something that pleased both genders. Even more so if he had one wife. Wow. This was not what Kiryu, Murayama, or Caddis were expecting at all. Kiryu was questioning herself in the tale he spun for them, swearing to get to the bottom of this for the sake of her curiosity, while Caddis and Murayama swore to high heaven that he was lying and that the rings were fake. But, for some unknown reason, they just couldn't call him out on it. They wanted to oh so desperately, but for some reason the words weren't coming out of their mouths. Shaking her head to gather her thoughts, Kiryu offered her praise. Well, congratulations Haidu. Whether that story is true or not, it isn't difficult to see you've changed. What happened to the boy who was going to be a harem king and loved to peek on the girls' changing rooms? Seemingly a harmless question, Issei couldn't help but recall everything that has happened since he entered the world of the supernatural. Getting stabbed by a girl he loved. Becoming a devil. Saving Asia and overcoming Rainer. Beating Riser. His fight against Kakabiel. Learning that God was dead. The attack of the witches. His fight with Vali. Idora. The Juggernaut. He went through a lot. Was his answer, unable to tear his gaze away from the palm which hid the infinity gear beneath his skin, a warm and loving smile decorating his features. He experienced things he never thought he would and learned from them. He grew up. Matured. An extended palm at face level became a resolved fist determined to put the past behind him. Not forget, but to remember the innocent boy that made him into the man he was today. The boy. No, man in front of Kiryu had left her completely astonished, alongside everyone else in the room, teacher included. Near-death experiences changed people, it wasn't difficult to believe, but for such a perverted individual who delighted in blatant lechery with no thoughts for the future to become this manly, determined, and flat-out sexy thing. If Issei wasn't standing before her in the flesh, she would have called bullshit right then and there. Do you mind if I ask another question? Shoot. Aika hesitated a bit, placing her weight from one foot to the other and gripping her hands nervously, debating if her inquiry was appropriate. You have 3 wives, right? That means you have done it right. Sex, I mean. As much as she acted like a pervert around the trio, she was still inexperienced with men, and the topic of actual intercourse was still rather sensitive and embarrassing to talk about in front of so many people. Of course, I have. The rather blatant reply shocking literally everyone in the classroom, not expecting such a sudden and confident answer. There wasn't even a single trace of doubt or anything that could be used to see if he was lying either. He was telling the truth. And 2 people didn't take well to it. Bullshit. Motohama and Mitsuda exclaimed loudly, large streams of tears falling from their eyes, not wanting to believe anything that they were hearing. I refuse to accept it. Mitsuda pointed his finger. I refuse to believe you managed to lose your virginity before us. Motohama nodded fiercely at his comrade's statement, his beliefs the same as what appeared to be the other half of what is now the perverted duo. This outright denial of reality from his former friends was beginning to grate on Issei's nerves, a growl forcing its way out of clenched teeth. It was a deep rumbling sound that did not inspire fear like the frigid beratement he gave the 2 perverts minutes earlier. The low vibrating noise had all of the girls shivering in want, including Murema and Caddis, much to their horror. I have no reason to prove either of you wrong and, honestly, I gain nothing from doing so. I'm just going to do it to shut the both of you up and hopefully knock some humility in you. With that being said, Issei's hands moved up towards the buttons on his shirt, undoing them one by one. As each button parted ways for the red C's underneath, the girls found that they were having a hard time looking away as the very taut undershirt came into view. The men, on the other hand, could not help but wonder what kind of exercise Issei did to get that kind of body in such a short period of time. Finishing with the last button, the top layer of attire slid down the broad shoulders onto a desk directly behind the dragon god. In a rather foul mood despite the attention he was getting from the boys and girls alike. Issei quickly shed the scarlet fabric to reveal a rock-hard six-pack that had the guys feeling jealous, while the girls simply couldn't take their eyes off of the glorious hunk of man that turned out to be one of the people they used to shun the most. But the undershirt taken care of, Issei turned his back to the class. Holy hell, man. What the fuck are those? Are those scratch marks? Who has nails that long? The students, even the teacher who could not seem to stop a scene in front of him, or even speak for that matter, were in shock at the view of his masterpiece of a back. Long lines of various shapes and sizes the color of a blood-red candy apple were present across his broad shoulders and spine. Some were significantly darker than others, possibly distinguishing the newer from the older. In addition to the vast variety of mutilations upon his quite muscular back, there were numerous bite marks and hickeys on his neck and shoulders. Satisfied? Issei asked the ignorant fools who dared to question his status as a man. Motohama and Mitsuda, knowing they were beat, fell to the ground in an overcomedic fashion, muttering about how the world was unfair and such. Well, if there are no more questions, I seem to have developed a sudden yet rather strong desire to get the hell out of here. Not bothering to put his clothes back on, he put his arms through the button-up shirt and stuffed the other piece of cloth in his book bag, not caring about the dress code he knew was in place. Roughly tossing it, under human standards, over his shoulder, the fed-up dragon god disguised as a human walked out of the class with his abs in full view of the students in the hallway, earning a lot of blushes and eager stares from the females and glares from the men. Doing his best to ignore the attention he was getting, Issei couldn't help but reflect on what just happened. A day that started rather nicely, waking up in a soft and warm bed with a naked Shirin hugging him, a beautiful sunny, albeit green, sky with cotton candy decorating the emerald expanse above, a gentle breeze blowing through his freshly showered hair, had turned into him being the spotlight of the entire school, enduring the prattling and breaching of the boring as hell teachers. Kiryu asking about the rings he didn't bother to hide, and the perverted duo's overreactions. Sure, Issei knew there would be reactions positive and negative alike, and he couldn't help but think about how Mitsuda and Motohama got under his skin so easily. Was it because they used to be friends? Perverted comrades who looked out for the other's needs? Or was it because he simply couldn't accept that he used to be just like them? A great big nothing with no real plans for the future, peeped on girls for a hobby, and constantly had a hand down his pants. Forcing himself to stop thinking about such things, he reached into his pocket to pull out the folded piece of paper that he had been drawing on during the class periods. A single touch of his finger and a flash of purple later, and the crumpled up page instantly straightened like it was never in his pocket to begin with. The original plan was to simply sit by one of the two pillars at the courtyard opening and work on this magic circle. Now, however, he simply wanted to start making his way to the rest of the Issei team. It would spare him any more attention, and he could go back to working on his project. Then again, he had been training diligently for a century now. Maybe taking a seat in the beautiful grass and enjoying the rest of the day before he deals with the kendo club. It was then that a rather unpleasant memory invaded his mind, forcing his legs to cease. Maybe I should apologize to Sona. He could still remember every vivid detail of that fateful day. Rias and her peerage berating him, how he lost control over his emotions, and even how he had sent Sona flying into a remnant of what was a brick wall. Issei was on a rampage, and the only thing she wanted was to help her friend. Not exactly something that earned a modified dragon shot to the abdomen, was it? Also, pretty sure I wrote student council on my letter of challenge instead of orc. Better clear that misunderstanding up. But that thought dancing in his head, Issei spun on his heel, and with the sound of shoes on a tile floor echoing off of the walls, the dragon disguised as a student traveled down the opposite end of the hallway. Sona Citri was in a rather unique mood. Sitting behind the polished wooden desk with her hands clasped on said wood, those fuchsia-colored eyes seemed to be bound to the back of the door connecting her office to the rest of the student council. Issei Haidu is alive. Not only had he been the talk of the school for the entire day, she saw him with her own eyes as he entered school property. In addition to all the girls gossiping about his return, there wasn't a single soul in Kuo Academy that didn't know the final member of the perverted trio once again stalks the changing areas. The antics were somewhat amusing if she was being perfectly honest. Issei was an individual who had always been true to his desires, making no attempts to hide the fact that he wanted a harem and to be the king of them all. Such relationships weren't uncommon among those in the underworld, especially when purebloods were considered. After their numbers were brought to an all-time low after the Great War, the council had permitted polygamy, incest, and other such questionable relationships, so long as they assisted in the revival of the purebloods. Being one herself, she was being heavily encouraged to consider a relationship herself. Not unlike Rias, she flat out refused to take on any partners that failed to meet her standards. However, she was not unreasonable. Sona was kind enough to provide her parents some amount of leeway in these types of matters. If they truly wished for her to marry, the suggested individual, as well as anyone else interested in courting her, would have to meet one requirement. Only one. And that one requirement had yet to be met, allowing the Citri heir to continue living as the student council president of Kuo Academy and taking steps to fulfill her dream of creating a raiding game school where all devils would be welcome, pure bloods and reincarnated alike. However, there was still a lot to do in order to make her visions a reality. While she had come to the human world to learn how their educational system works, there were other tasks that needed to be completed. A plot of land had to be acquired, building materials for said school, permission from the Satans, a teaching permit, and teachers to name a few. Some of what she needed to get done were easier than others, such as the permit and permission. The costs and land, however. Sona did not want her school to be Citri property. In order to prevent that, she had to come up with the cash on her own. While not necessarily difficult in of itself, the amount of money needed was far greater than her current winnings from the raiding games. She had to get stronger and make her peerage stronger in order to win more raiding games and climb the ladder. The higher up the rankings she got, the higher the cash prizes would be. Knock. Knock. The rapping of knuckles against wood drew the Citri heir from her thoughts. Madam President. The voice belonged to one of her bishops, Ryakusaka. Issei Haidu is here to see you. I see. Thank you. Tell him I will be ready to see him shortly. The clip-clop retreating from the entrance was proof that her bishop was doing as she was told. It took a few moments for what Rias said to sink it. Once she realized what exactly her servant told her, Sona's normally calm and calculating mind spun itself into a frenzy. Issei is here to see me. It had been a month since the accident that nearly destroyed the school and almost revealed the supernatural to humans. It was only thanks to the student council that the devils were able to contain the accident, removing the bodies and wiping the memory of those who were, by some miracle, able to stay conscious during his episode. Needless to say, Issei became very feared after the event passed, explaining Ria's faltering speech. "Come in, please," she called out, straightening some random papers on her desk, a drum in her chest pounding away as if it was in a parade, the emotions her peerage felt for the dragon not exceeding herself, seeing as she quickly became nothing but collateral mere seconds after garnering his attention. Sona watched the door open with a small squeak and revealed the two she expected to see. A girl with flowing coffee-colored hair and matching eyes, and the man who dispatched her without a hint of F. Shirtless. The bare-chested man entered her office with his button-up shirt open to reveal a roaring six-pack, with his backpack slung over his right shoulder. Seemingly without a care for his appearance, her guest sat in the chair opposite of the nicely polished desk and placed a bag on the floor. Silence. Thank you for waiting for me, Issei. Sona finally greeted him, doing her best to ignore Issei's appearance in favor of dismissing her bishop via curt nod. Under normal circumstances, she would have reprimanded him for such an appearance. The fact that he had delivered a punishing blow to her earlier that month, proving that she was no match for him, let alone her entire peerage if he chose to reenact the events that took place during that time, forced her to bite her tongue and tolerate his appearance. Given his rather calm and collected behavior, however, she didn't really think he planned to do anything like that, but she couldn't really afford to take risks at the moment either. Did you have some business with me? The boy answered with a quick nod but said nothing further, instead taking the time to explore the Citri's office with his eyes. As Issei had never been in this room before, he took the time to appreciate the obsidian flooring beneath their feet, the windows providing a plentiful amount of light, a classic wooden desk you would expect to see in a CEO's office, the decorative pictures along the walls depicting a variety of scenery. One of such was a sun setting on an still ocean, as the clouded sky changed from orange to pink to purple, and finally to black with a starry sky. I do actually. He finally spoke, the surrounding environment doing much to help calm his frustration. Mostly a small matter, one that may or may not have reached your ears in full detail. And what may this matter be, exactly? The king, watching her fellow student visibly relaxing, could not help but feel greatly relieved. It seemed that, despite the rather horrid incident, it seemed Issei was still capable of acting in a manner that was similar to how he had before. It still didn't get rid of this negative feeling she had. I challenged the Kendo club to a match that will be held later this afternoon. If they win, the perverted trio leaves them alone. If I win, then the perverted trio will leave them alone and Cadis and Murayama will meet me in a place of my choosing. So, the three of you will leave them alone whoever wins. You aside, how do you plan on getting those two to agree? I can't expect it will be easy. A crooked mischievous grin split across his face, showing teeth that were far sharper than they had any right to be. Trust me, there are ways to curb their deviant behavior. I just happen to know the perfect method to do so. Very much concerned for the fates of the two boys, Sona was about to inquire about the specifics of this perfect method when, all of a sudden, the door opened to reveal a bespectacled beauty with absolutely radiant black hair that fell down her back in waves. The girl was carrying an ornate circular tray with 2 steaming mugs on it. Is it that time already, Tsubaki? Sona, having been caught up in her paperwork up until Issei dropped in, had failed to notice that her afternoon brew was drawing close. It is. The Citri's queen confirmed, presenting a cup to her king. It took me a little longer since I thought it would be nice to treat your guest as well. Tsubaki then extended the remaining cup to Issei, whom took it with a silent nod accompanied with a smile. Silence filled the room while the occupant sampled the brew of the day, the deliverer moving to stand behind Sona and slightly towards her right. Issei, being the very healthy male he was, could not help but notice that the circular was held beneath Tsubaki's breasts in an eerily similar manner to that of Ikeno. The king allowed herself a blissful sigh despite her pounding chest. Tsubaki, once again you have outdone yourself. I have to agree. The boy contributed his praise for the brewer's skills, savoring the taste lingering on his tongue. I don't think I have ever had a cup like this before. It's rich, earthy, and full-bodied. What kind of coffee is this? Life Boost Coffee Medium Roast. It is an Arabic bean originating in Nicaragua. Really? I might have to see about getting my hands on some as well. He took another sip of the coffee, unable to help himself. The atmosphere had greatly relaxed in comparison when Issei first arrived. Combined with the sun filling the room and the pleasant aroma in the air, it was almost peaceful. Anyway, back to what we were discussing before. Issei brought their conversation back from where it was pleasantly interrupted. I gave them a letter of challenge explaining the terms of victory and whatnot. The reason I am here is that I accidentally wrote Issei Haidu of the student council and not of the orc. I just wanted to bring that to your attention so there was no confusion later. Oh, was that all? Despite the relaxing atmosphere, Sona was still feeling anxious to his presence. It helped that the matter he brought up wasn't anything serious, but she just couldn't shake this feeling, this foreboding sensation, this sense of dread. She did her best not to show it, and it seemed to be working. Tsubaki seemed to be experiencing something similar if the singular beat of sweat and occasional hitch in breathing were anything to go by. Wait. You said you challenged the Kendo club, correct? That is what I said, yes. Why would someone as strong as him have anything to do with a group of humans? He wasn't the type that sought out pain and suffering upon others. I'm sorry. Were you trying to tell me to calm down? no thanks. No. He would. If push came to shove, he would. But had the kendo club done anything to earn his ire? She couldn't really think of anything. The beatings. When the perverted trio got caught peeping, the kendo took it upon themselves to punish them. Is he planning on getting some sort of revenge for the questionable behavior he was victim to back then? Would you be willing to give me a reason as to why you decided to do so? He didn't really have a good reason to hide the fact he believed two of their members had sacred gears. But on the other hand, perhaps it would be better to hold on to that little tidbit until his hunch was proven true or false. The little payback, I guess, was the half-truth he came up with, donning a thinking expression as if he didn't really know himself. After all, getting mobbed with swords over seeing some skin. A little much, don't you think? Getting a taste of their own medicine should do them some good. It seemed that her fears were well placed. While she didn't agree with it, Sona could see his reasoning. If someone was peeping on a girl, or girls, in real life, chances are that the pervert in question intends to go much farther than simply seeing skin. The girls were also all human, so if the culprit was armed, seriously armed, no bamboo stick is going to matter. The kendo sword was better than nothing, true, but pales in comparison to a gun or, even worse, literally anything supernatural. Issei was still very much among the supernatural world. Her nerves wouldn't be on fire right now if he had simply managed to survive cutting the sacred gear out of him and gone back to being an ordinary human or, by some miracle, managed to retain his status as a devil. Is there any way I can convince you to not go through with this? Whether she can understand it or not, she was still the student council president. While she may not have done anything in the past regarding the perverted trio and the kendo club, the circumstances were different now. Sona knew that if she were to gather the full might of her peerage and challenge him, despite him no longer in possession of the boosted gear, he would dominate them, even with her newfound power. What chance would a group of humans have? If this was the old Issei, the Citri heir was confident that this challenge would not escalate into anything due to his caring albeit perverse personality. But now, with this bad feeling that just would not leave her alone, combined with the fact that Issei was standing before her perfectly healthy, complete with both arms, despite the fact that he cut one off, she wasn't exactly willing to take chances at the moment. I won't say you can't, I am more than willing for negotiation. The real reason I'm targeting the club is because there are a few in there that have piqued my interest. There was no way they were going to let me satisfy that interest either, given my reputation. I figured I would dangle myself at the end of a hook and see if they bit. Now that they have, I plan on taking full advantage of it. Unless you can conjure something that can change my mind, I'm afraid there is nothing you can. A small glint caught his eye. Turning to see what the owner of said glint was, a small table was what greeted his sight. On the poorly decorated two-person table was a chess set, the light from the window shining through the colored glass of the pieces, creating a rather beautiful red and scarlet glow. Are those evil pieces? In a way. Sona answered, watching his every move like a hawk. They were modeled after such by a devil craftsman. Do you have an interest in chess? You could say that. Training for a century was tiring on both the body and the mind. It went without saying that most of them needed to take a break every once in a while. Not exactly content with just resting, Issei had thought of ways to entertain and challenge himself when he remembered the raiding games. Then he remembered the evil pieces, aka, magic chess pieces. Issei never really had any interest in games before he became a devil, unless they involved some sort of pornographic content. He asked Kuroka, and she conjured up a set using her space-time magic, and they played a few games during their downtime. The Ouroboros dragon was terrible. So terrible was he at this strategic challenge that the Issei group considered it a talent. One that was not needed. Over the last 100 years, Issei underwent physical training during the day and would train his mind at night using chess alongside his main mentors, Kuroka and Arthur. For so long it was only been with those two, not counting the occasional Shirin and Vali match. How do I pair up with Sona, one of the smartest of the young devils? Hey Sona. He called, turning to face the expectant gazes. Would you be interested in a match? The boy waited for several moments only for silence to echo in his ears. The brunette was simply staring at him with her lips parted, a healthy flush filling her features, while her queen seemed to be doing her best impression of a fish. A single eyebrow rose at the complete and total lack of response. It was a simple question with a simple yes or no answer. I didn't ask anything weird, did I? No. The other part of his soul answered. You didn't. Is that strange to ask for a simple game? It shouldn't. Then again, who knows what sort of shit high-class devils have in place. Perhaps I violated some sort of ancient treaty, and now they must skin me alive and feed it to the damned or something. We both know that isn't true. Yeah, I know. The point still stands though, we don't know a lot about the Citri family in the first place. Hello? A couple snaps brought the king and queen back to reality. Is that a no? cause I have no prob. Ah. An attempt to speak was made with a raised hand. The dragon in hiding had no problem stopping mid-sentence to let Sona speak, the tickling sensation in the back of his brain, begging to be satisfied. Thanks. As for your question, I am unable to say no to a challenge, due to reasons involving the Citri household. The blush only seemed to grow more and more vibrant as she spoke. What do you mean? Unab. I'll. The words seemingly caught in her throat, the second highest authority in the Citri peerage, for some reason, could not form what she was thinking into words, once again interrupting Issei. After several further attempts at speech, however, her chest began to rise and fall very visibly. When she spoke this time, tangible language reached their ears. Haidu-sama. Are you absolutely certain you want to play against Sona-sama in a chess match? Are you even aware of what is at stake should you win? Haidu-sama. And a surprisingly quick hint from Issei. Has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? I will neither confirm nor deny. Of course I do. Was the almost immediate reply. I wouldn't have asked if I was ignorant. If she wins, I call off the kendo match. If I win, she owes me a favor since she didn't specify beforehand. Just like home. The winnings were always decided before any chess match could begin when everyone was doing their training. If nothing got specified before the conclusion of the game, then a favor was required. This was when Issei played against either Vali, Biku, or Arthur. When playing against Kuroka and Shirin, these favors were more intimate, not necessarily perverted. Believe it or not, there was a difference. But Sona wasn't one of his wives, so the first option was obvious. Despite this, Sona was looking like a freshly picked apple. Her body was completely still while Tsubaki once again lost her ability to produce coherent speech. What was going on? Be very well. A rare stutter exited the king's lips. Just give me a moment. A hand to her chest, a slow exhale, and an inhale so deep that her bosom visibly rose. Seemingly resolved herself, another exhale and the gallant, stoic, and sexy figure of the student council president had returned. I am ready. The sound of wheels rolling across the floor reached his ears as he watched the girl stand from her space behind the desk and make her way to the other side of the small table, holding the demonic chess set. That was more interesting than I thought it was going to be. Ophis told him as he walked aimlessly through the unkept streets of Kuo with his stomach still out in the open, the sky a brilliant shade of blue as the wind played with his hair. You're not wrong. Sona is definitely a skilled player. There were a couple of times where I thought the game was going to end, but one of us would find a way around the other. I think that was one of my best games to date. This day would have been perfect if not for Motohama and Mitsuda. Yes, they were rather displeasing to be near. The deity agreed. I am surprised that the Grimoires didn't attempt to make contact with you. Asia is in my class if memory serves, among a few others. It is rather strange that one of them didn't approach me. I wasn't really paying attention at the time, to be perfectly honest, working on my project and whatnot. Do you think it will work? I hope so. This isn't exactly something I can just use whenever I want. The person has to be willing, and that wasn't what I was talking about. That one I really hope so. We need to acquire all the strength we can get, despite what the other deities might think. You have been working on that circle for half a century now, with the help of Kuroka and Vali. There should be no problems. There shouldn't be, true, but with something of this level, you can never be certain. Point. So, why do you think the Grimoires haven't tried to contact you? It could be anything. They could be upset with me and just avoid me altogether, or are waiting for me to walk through the door of the orc like nothing ever happened. Unlikely, but not impossible. There was no immediate response as the two of them enjoyed the rushing sound of the eager breeze, waiting out the clock until it was time for him to return to school to deal with the kendo club. There were very few people in the streets because a lot of humans were still working at this hour. The small quantity of people that were here, however, immediately took notice of the boy. Numerous pairs of eyes were automatically drawn to him like moths to a flame. The men would look at him with a weird mix of respect and acknowledgement as he strode by, and the small pockets of girls that he came across couldn't seem to take their eyes off of him. Do you plan on going back to see them? I have no intentions of doing so. He instantly denied. We didn't really leave on the best of circumstances. They might be willing, I most certainly am not. And what of the good things that they have done for you? Hey there, pretty boy. A deep and seductive feminine voice tickled his ear as two somethings wrapped itself around his shoulder and his waist, a sensation akin to nibbling on his neck, not mentioning the wonderful sensation of something velvet soft against his back. Issei leaned into the individual behind him and laughed softly as the feline dragged her lips across the side of his neck. Did someone have a good day at school, Naya? Hey. See, cut that out, Kuroka. The boy addressed the pretty catgirl that was holding him so tightly he might as well be wearing her. But to answer your question, it was a rather interesting day. The Grimoires didn't try anything. I need to deal with some teenagers later, and I had a fairly good chess match today. And I am guessing they are gathered in their clubroom waiting for me to walk in the door. The feline hummed her acknowledgement as she ran her hand up, down, and all around the boy's abs, much to Issei's happiness. Are you planning on seeking them out yourself, Naya? Ophis literally just asked me that. I told her that I wasn't going to, but then she said something about all of the good things they did for me in the past. What do you think? Should I go hear it out of their own lips? Or go with my assumption that they wanted to force me into acknowledging my feelings for Rias? The boy asked for what the elder sister of the Nekashu sisters thought about his situation. Veroka seemed to contemplate this as her hands were slowing down his back and eventually stopping altogether just above his hips, creating a romantic hug as her head rested against his muscular back. I think it makes sense. She told him. I don't think your assumption is wrong, but don't you think they deserve a chance to explain themselves? He really didn't want to do anything for them after their betrayal. They ignored his feelings for that of a selfish person who couldn't see beyond what she wanted. They wronged him. They didn't deserve him. Call me my name because it means you love me. I gave up my life and parts of my body numerous times for you, but to hell with that, say my goddamn name. Negative thoughts raced through his head, his fists squeezing into his palms while his teeth gnashing against themselves. Veroka, noticing the eerie purple glow that shone off of his body, took a harder look at him. His aura is becoming unstable and beginning to leak out. As the purple wisp starting to grow taller and stronger, she leaned in so that her lips were brushing against his ear. Shhh, calm down, honey. You don't want to call down the forces of heaven and hell here, do you, Naya? The boy instantly paused, not because of the incoming threat should he continue thinking along these lines, but because of the soothing voice that started to outshine the darkness in his head. Without even thinking, he reached out and pulled Kuroka into him, earning an unworried Naya. The dragon took his time to drink in the sight of the beautiful young woman in his arms. His eyes traveled up to appreciate her pointy cat ears, melt into her long black hair with split bangs, think about how the ornately detailed headband makes her hair stand out, slowly traveling down to her hazel gold eyes that seemed to swallow him in their warmth, wondered how that black kimono with a yellow obi managed to conceal her voluptuous assets. And asked himself how he managed to secure such a bombshell of a beauty as one of his wives. Better? She asked him, seeing the dangerous aura starting to subside from her dear husband. Better? He told her, burying his darker feelings about the red-headed bitch. Sorry, Kuro. I thought I got over it. I don't think something like that can ever be truly let go, Issei. Don't beat yourself up over it. So? Will you go? An innocent face asked from eloquent lips that seemed to keep drawing Issei to him. It hadn't been that long, had it? A week at most. The boy sighed a heavy sigh, not looking forward to seeking them out anytime soon, but knowing that if he didn't, it would bite him in the butt later on. Probably. Yeah, might as well. But I want you there when it happens. Actually, let Shirin and Lefane know as well. Why, Naya? My class dared to question my status as a man. I cooked up a story and I want to drive the point home. So, you want to flaunt us, is that it, Naya? Basically. Well, I don't know about those two, but my services don't come cheap, Naya. Those sexy lips peeled up in order to form what Issei called the smile. The black cat's eyes narrowed oh so slightly, the faintest glimmer of her pearly whites behind velvet lips, not to mention the silky soft tails that were massaging his area where very clear signs of mood she was in. The chuckle sang as he ran his hand through her perfect hair, grazing the edges of her ear and earning a few mules from the older Nekashu. The sounds that left her mouth was like a drug, absolutely intoxicating, and there was never enough. Overcome by the same desire his partner felt, the boy began walking down the street, much to Kuroka's confusion. Where are you going? Don't you want to have some fun, Naya? I don't know about you, but I am going to a hotel. Not a single soul is allowed to see my own gorgeous gal in all her glory. His feet continued to tread onward despite the question asked of him. Only after he had finished speaking did he turn to face his first wife. A small smirk on his face, an excited glint in his eye, his fingers in the belt loops of his pants as the setting sun shone down on him in that sexy pose. Suddenly assaulted with such a view, Kuroka failed to fight down the hot sensation currently spreading across her face and nethers. And if you don't mind, I could use your help taking this uniform off. Among other things. That playful tone paired with that cocky smile and that look in his eyes, all it took was a wink and a lick of his lips to leave the feline shuddering in anticipation. Eager to finally have her turn in bed, it took mere strides until she snatched up his arm and pulled it into her cleavage. Resting her head on his shoulder, any onlookers that were present on the very empty street could not help but blush at the romantic pair as they strolled towards their destination. After what felt like an eternity, they managed to make their way into one of the hotels in the red light district of Kuo. No attention was paid to what the building was called, nor could they be bothered to remember the man who handed them the key to their room. All they knew was that the key was in hand, and in only a few moments they would be all over each other. They didn't even make it out of the lobby. The door leading into room they didn't care burst open, giving way to Issei's foot. Not caring if it was damaged, the two lovers currently waged a fierce battle for dominance in each other's mouth. So distracted with each other's lips, Issei didn't notice how close the bed was and ended up tripping on the furniture. Oof. Not expecting the sudden weight of Kuroka falling on top of him, a small exhale was forced out of him, breaking their kiss lest they bite their wet appendages. Ha 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 ha. The black-haired beauty laughed hysterically. Did you haha? Just say ha ha ha. Did you just save? Ha 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 ha. She was barely able to place actual words in between the gasps of breath and laughter, the yaokai laughing so hard that she couldn't even voice her verbal tick. The boy underneath the bundle of joy was both happy and not happy at her violent chuckling. Do you have any room to talk with all of that lying you do? A smile crept its way onto the boy's face, happy that his wife was pleased despite the blow to his pride. But that is because I am a cat Naya. Her lips turned up so that her smile and nose looked like an upside-down 3 as she stroked the air with her right hand shaped into a cat paw. The bright blush covered his face in mere moments, reaching up to cup the girl's cheek. They couldn't keep their hands off of each other on their way here, now he wanted to savor the moment. As confusing as it was, the crimson shade on his lover's face told him she certainly didn't mind the change in atmosphere herself. Kuroka. Issei. She moaned, letting herself get pulled down for another intoxicating French. Very little time has passed since the first passionate lip lock was interrupted, but the second one certainly didn't take long. As the more intimate kiss progressed, Issei couldn't help but feel the desire for more. One mischievous hand left her cheek to travel down her neck and rest at her hip, while the other stayed where it was and simply maneuvered to cup the back of her head. Kuroka. The unspoken want evident in his voice, the feline had no problem in providing. The kiss deepened, the girl pushing herself into his embrace as her hands also ran through his hair. After several minutes of being the invader, Issei broke the kiss connecting them. Seeing the disappointed frown and yearning look in his lover's eyes, Issei merely gave her a look. Raising his head up, a sensual lick was delivered to Kuroka's throat. It isn't fair if I'm doing all the work. Getting the message, Kuroka raised an eyebrow but did not hesitate, licking her lips in a provocative manner. As she looming over him, Issei's lips opened slightly to receive her eager muscle, something she was all too willing to give. The Nekomata leaned forward and passionately pressed herself against him, wrestling with his in an agonizingly gentle manner, taking her time to explore every nook and cranny of his mouth. The subtle drop in intensity led to an even more intimate air. Issei simply could not believe a kiss could taste and feel so good. Prior to his transformation to a devil, he spent quite a bit of his free time soloing it with phone in hand. Based on all of the love advice sites and the porn he watched, he learned that kissing was pretty much a requirement to building the atmosphere appropriate for sex and romance overall. However, he had only been given a kiss on the lips in the form of a peck in places like his cheek. This kind of kiss, however, was reserved for only 3 people. Kuroka, Shirin, and Ophis. And did they know how to kiss, especially Kuroka? She always had that older sister aura about her, and with her somewhat provocative attire and mannerisms, he always thought that she was experienced with men. How wrong he was. She had never known a man until they had their first time together. However, despite her lack of experience, she was simply divine in the ways of the bedroom. Even something as commonplace as a kiss or a compliment turned into something completely different when she did them. Issei felt like he was on cloud 9 just from brushing their lips together and having his mouth explored. Kuroka felt the same about Issei. She didn't have anything to compare Issei's kiss to because she hasn't kissed another man before. From her experience with kissing this Adonis of a man, she could say with full confidence that he is a god in the bedroom. Every single time they did it, she would always finish 3 times at least. How many women truly that many times from a man in a single session? The Nekomata didn't think there was a lot of men out there capable of lasting that long, let alone making the girl finish that many times without her faking it. Her only guess to his simply divine skill was his unnatural amount of libido. In order to quench that desire for the opposite sex while he was still a human, Issei must have resorted to porn to satisfy himself. While much of that inappropriate content did not translate into real life and is often just a performance meant to sexually please the viewer, some of the techniques used in said porn did translate over. That, combined with the times they did it in the past, Issei has learned all of her kinks and weaknesses and exploited them over and over again, never failing to give her the ride of her life. You taste so good. Issei. Maybe cause I eat tasty food. BFF. Haha, yeah, okay Mr. Smartmouth. The small joke earned him a light jab to the shoulder, but it was worth it to her the melody that was her laugh. Naya. Already going for me? Kuroka moaned in appreciation as Issei's hands began to roam over her supple thighs. And what about you? You think I didn't notice you trying to take off my pants? As he spoke, Kuroka had just managed to get the button undone and was already working on the zipper, sincerely believing that he didn't notice with all of the action happening up top. But it isn't fair that you get to play with mine and I can't play with yours, Naya. She pouted lightly before getting back to working those skinny jeans off. Then maybe wear something that actually makes me work for it. I can just reach up and under, and what do we have here? He swiftly maneuvered his hands under her clothing and began to knead the soft flesh beneath her robes. Wah. Hey. This is payback, you cocky dragon, Naya. Finally working Issei's pants to the ground, damn those tight things, she instantly cupped his package and started playing with the contents through his boxers, making the boy start to pant lightly at the pleasure. Rolling around his jewels in her hand and pressing her face against her boxer-covered junk was an excellent way to get him riled up. That, and the fact that her heightened sense of smell never failed to pick up the manly musk that never failed to get her excited. Kuroka, you got better at this. Didn't you say it wasn't fair for me to play with yours? So you were going to play with mine. I was going to do that. But then I saw this big mountain of man meat and got a little hungry, Naya. Her hands were beginning to grow more adventurous as her fingers began to find the gaps in his boxers, only to once again cup his undercarriage and apply just the right amount of force to get her lover's hips to buck. Oh well. Issei ran his fingers through the black silk that covered the top of the girl's head, enjoying the sensation of her smooth hair between the gaps in his hands. You know I am not that big. It was left unsaid that while he was huge among humans, the supernatural males topped out at over a foot in length. Yeah, I know. She drew her attention away from his privates in favor of looking him in the eye with that goddamn sexy smile, and those partially opened eyes that gave her a more seductive look, making Issei swallow his saliva, and his holy temple grew even larger. Sure, having a big one can be a good thing. Men become prideful and women actually get to feel something. Kuroka paused for a few moments as the twitching mass beneath the cloth drew her attention. With a playful growl and a quick swipe of her hand, she reached into his boxers and pulled out a 9-inch long of man meat. But once you go past a certain limit, men either can't penetrate women due to their size, or it just hurts cause she can't stretch far enough. As she spoke, her hand wrapped around Issei's and began to pump itself up and down in a loose and gentle manner. Line break. Unable to contain herself, Kuroka's body thrashed about below her mate. Her hands turned into claws that grasped at the sheets, her legs tightened and shook from the overwhelming pleasure as her head slammed onto the pillow repeatedly, biting it as moan after throaty moan escaped her throat. The lightning did not leave her veins for several minutes, even after her body finally calmed down, the afterglow more than enough to put her into a well-welcomed slumber. Issei, fully satisfied with the result, sat up and stood away from the bed as he licked his lips to enjoy the flavor of her skin. Chocolate with a touch of mint. The amount of nerves in the Nekashu's tails and ears never ceases to amaze me. Ophis spoke as Issei stripped down to step into the shower that came with the room. To derive that kind of reaction from such minimal contact. From what she told me, a Nekashu has more nerve endings in their ears than humans do, thus the heightened sensitivity. As for their tail, it is directly connected to her spine, so when you give it a yank or play with it, that sensation travels throughout their entire body. Combine those with her already heightened physical senses, and the number of times we did it in the past, that kind of reaction is pretty much going to be the norm. He turned the shower nozzle to medium hot and turned his back to the flowing water, allowing the warm liquid to envelop him. You don't seem finished for the night. Not expecting the comment, he opened his eyes to question the deity inside him, only to notice his still rock hard and ready for more. I blame you for this. He told her. I already had problems with my sexual stamina before you enhanced it further. I did not enhance it specifically. Ophis denied. The desires of a dragon are not something to underestimate, especially since you already had a very large sex drive before we became one. You can deny it as much as you want, I still blame you for this. He pointed a finger to his already rock-hard erection. He came twice already and still was sporting all 9 inches of glory. Without drugs. At this rate, he was genuinely worried that he might break Kuroka if he stopped holding himself back. Well then, if you insist that I am the problem, I should take responsibility for it and soften you up a bit. The black fog began to emerge from the dragon's left arm. Issei watched as a small bead of sweat traveled down his face as the fog took on the form of the true black dragon god of infinity. Who so happened to be kneeling before his kingdom in nothing but a birthday suit. My turn, my mate. She told him with a lick of her lips as she leaned forward to welcome it into her warm, wet mouth. Oh, shit. Issei laughed nervously before the sensation nearly made his legs buckle. Shortly afterward, he straightened himself and looked outside a blurred glass window by his head. Rias. If you had only remembered, it could have been you on my bed or with me in the shower. Now, you will never have this chance. Now that he thought about it, he did tell Kuroka that he was going to give Rias and friends a chance to explain themselves, right? He was pretty sure it was because he stopped saying her name, but Issei never heard it directly from Rias herself. Could it be something different? Yes. Was it likely? No. I'll think about that later. He thought, turning his attention to the small dragon enjoying his meat. I have to deal with the girls soon, Kendo Club and Orc both. Anticipation. After classes ended and the students began their journey to the courtyard where the anticipated match would be held, the devils of the Grimoire peerage made their way towards the clubroom. On one couch sat Kiba and Zenobia, while the other held Asia and Gasper. Okendo was preparing some tea for their king whom sat at her desk facing the rest of her peerage. Irina, who was invited by the blonde bishop, sat in a chair next to the window. Silence loomed over the thick atmosphere within the Orc clubroom. Fluffy tangerines littered the azure skies outside as the sun drew closer to the horizon. The students could be seen gathering just below the window that overlooked the courtyard, despite there still being some time before the match started. Asia, you said Issei is back. And he is going to fight the Kendo Club later today? Yes. Asia answered her king. What about Kaneko? Did anyone see her? The obvious follow-up came almost too quickly. Rias was hoping that the object of their affections finally making an appearance would lead to the school mascot returning as well. Asia had her doubts that this was the case. Then again, she didn't believe Issei would come back and look what happened. She wasn't in her classroom. Okendo walked through the door connected to the miniature kitchen carrying a steaming cup on a circular. Her classmate said that they haven't seen her today either. Ha! Rias grimaced at no one in particular and let a singular hand comb through her silky hair before accepting the offered beverage. Well, if anything, we know that Issei is in Kuo. I never expected him to be willing to come back to school after what happened. I know shouldn't complain, but I wish Kaneko came back with him. Perhaps we can ask for her whereabouts from Issei directly. The peerage was absolutely ecstatic to see their friend alive and well. Asia was no exception to that. When she saw Issei entering the grounds looking more or less pleased, her heart simply soared. The blonde devil wanted to sprint into his arms and welcome him back with open arms, begging for his forgiveness all the while. But before she could turn her desire into reality, she felt something off about the man she betrayed. He felt cocky. No, that wasn't it. The former Red Dragon Emperor had this air of confidence about him. Every stride was filled with purpose, that unwavering gaze held an absolute certainty, and his picture-perfect posture were clear testaments to difference between the Issei she knew and the one coming to school. Despite these new additions to their former ally, it didn't change the fact that Asia was glad to know he was safe and sound. Those emotions were also shared among her friends in Rias' peerage. But why was he here? Asia couldn't help but wonder as to the reason behind his return. Issei had injured a great number of students, devils and humans alike, along with the property damages that took most of the month to repair. Does he really intend to come back as if everything never happened and expect the devils to just lie down and accept that? Two of the injured were the heirs of high-class peerages in the underworld, Citri and Grimoire, both of whom were directly related to literal satans, not to mention super devils. Seraphil in particular was absolutely obsessed with Sona, and while Serzich's wasn't nearly as bad as her, he still had his overprotective side. The wrath of the ultimate female devil and the Prince of Destruction. Was Issei simply ignorant? Did the thought never cross his mind? Or did the former Welsh Dragon simply not fear the eventual retribution? Asia was scared to approach him not because of the looming conflict, but of the conflict already transpired. Victim to incomparable guilt, she didn't dare to so much as speak to him. What would happen if she did? Would he scold her like last time? Would she be given forgiveness? She didn't know, and there was a part of her that didn't really want to know either, but the bishop knew that the longer this was drawn out, the harder it would be for their scarred friendship to heal. There was no doubt that everyone else felt the same. Fear was staying their hands, one that needed to be overcome. When is the fight going to happen? Asia looked up to see a hardened resolve burning behind Ria's sapphire spheres. 5 minutes in the courtyard. Irina, keeping to herself in the corner of the room, answered not only the question asked, but the answer she knew was soon to follow. Everyone knew what was about to transpire, the entire school did. Looking out the window herself, Asia could see the large crowd that had been present ever since the last bell rang. Everyone wanted to either see the girls make a fool of the pervert for being uppity, or see what made him so confident to openly challenge them in the first place. Then I suppose we should make our way down there. Knowing her, Sona is probably waiting for us. Having stated the desire of everyone in the room, the king made her way to the room's exit with the other devils on her heels. Rias. A voice stopped their collective advance. Are you prepared to face the consequences this time? The devil in question did not turn to face the person speaking to her. A few moments later and the sound of heels on hardwood could be heard, growing louder until the owner blocked the door. The angel stood in the way of the devil congregation. The facial expressions of the Scarlet Devil and the reincarnated angel remained unchanged as they simply stood and stared at one another. Do you really believe the mask Issei is wearing? That he is simply ready to forgive and forget and continue with life as it was? Irina didn't raise her voice when she spoke. There was no aggression evident in her voice either. Now Asia could be imagining things, but it seems like Irina didn't understand why Rias was willing to risk the dragons. Humans. Devils. Issei's anger. Lord knows how it happened last time, and it most certainly wasn't pretty. What really worried the former priest was that the same resolve seen in Rias could be seen in Irina's eyes as well. Asia knew both her friend and the look she had. Irina was prepared to do what she believed needed to be done to protect her friends. She doesn't want us to meet up with him. This realization came at the same time her king responded to the aggressive position Irina took up. To be perfectly honest, Irina, I don't know. Rias answered the angel as honestly as she could. While not as big as what happened with Issei, they did betray Irina by threatening and harassing him. The original plan was to simply criticize Issei for failing to understand Rias until he started using his brain to figure out why they were acting the way they were, nothing further. Yes, it was underhanded, yes, they regretted it. That was why. What I do know is that we hurt him in the worst possible way. There isn't any doubt in my mind that he is still hurting. However, the fact is he came here with a smile. You might be right, he may just be wearing another mask, but we can't just pretend the past didn't happen. Even if we can never go back to the way we were, even if there is nothing I would like more than to put this off, isn't it the right thing to do to apologize when you did something wrong? As soon as possible. You already apologized to him. Irina replied with an even tone while crossing her arms below her bust, not giving in to the reasonable argument. And that didn't end up so well. You're right in the fact that it didn't end the way we thought it would. Asia turned to see the blonde knight, surprised that he chose to speak up at all. Everyone messed up that day, but after herself and Rias, Kiba seemed to be the most affected from their poor decision. Now that Asia was actively thinking about it, it made sense. Kiba was the only other man in their group and, from her point of view, they got along like brothers. Despite that, he was the first to draw his blade and actually fought him. The knight most likely had to deal with the guilt of not only losing a friend and a brother, but from actually lashing out at him as well. The school building was destroyed. Kiba continued. Getting a whole shot into my stomach, humans dropping by the second, Sona blasted into a collapsed wall, and Ascalon pressing at Ria's neck was definitely not how I expected that whole ordeal to turn out. None of us could have expected Issei to do what he did, even if we repeated that event 1,000 times. But Irina, we ended up in that scenario because we couldn't see his trauma through Rias. Through our selfishness. The apology came once everything was already said and done. Kiba is right. Zenobia was quick to agree with her fellow knight. Ever since that day, the two of them secluded themselves to the training room back at home. They needed something to distract them from the grief and found that sparring with one another did just that. The two knights would have breakfast, then immediately leave to spar for the rest of the day. The only exceptions to this was for lunch or dinner. During that time, Kiba and Zenobia began to grow closer and closer to one another. It wasn't something Asia had noticed immediately, mostly due to her own rituals and the avoidance of certain troubling thoughts, but was clearly apparent after several weeks. Besides, do you really think Issei is going to be happy with an apology that he practically forced out of her? I don't think Issei is going to be happy to see any of you guys period, myself included. The even tone that started their argument broke into a frustrated shout, emphasized with a harsh stomp. The trauma that we put him through, on top of the suffering he was still enduring courtesy of Rainer, is not something that can be gotten over this quickly. The moment he sees you, he will explode. Again. Now hang on Irina, I don't agree with that. Zenobia raised her fist and slowly revealed the digits within. Issei won't be able to cause as much damage as last time since he cut Drake out of his body. Not only that, but this time we are prepared if things go south again. Even if he found a way to get stronger without the boosted gear, it can't be that bad, can it? We dove pretty hard into our training just so we wouldn't have to think about what we did wrong. Not just Kiba and I, you guys did so as well. On top of that, there can't be a lot out there that could be more powerful than a heavenly dragon. I think we stand at least a good chance. Issei is not weak. Irina interrupted with a bellow, the sudden exclamation bouncing off the walls for only a moment. I don't know about any of you, but something deep inside me is screaming at me to stay away from him. The only time I felt anything close to this was when Asia got sent to the dimensional gap and Issei turned Juggernaut on us. Given what happened last time, I'm going to stick with my gut and give him all the space he needs. Irina. Asia couldn't exactly deny what her friend was saying. She had experienced the same inexplicable sensation when she first saw him walking under the overpass at the school entrance. You need to keep your voice down. Yelling like this wasn't going to do anything besides get her more riled up, but the angel kept plowing on as if she had never heard her. What makes it worse is that I can't tell what he is anymore. Is he still a devil? A human? Something else? I can't feel any kind of power from him and, paired with this indescribable fear, scares me to no end. Irie. Once again Asia tried to get through to the angel, but yet again she was cut off. You guys could feel it too, couldn't you? Every fiber of your being shouting to the heavens in fear just a few moments after he. Proverbs 17:9. The deep voice of their resident healer cut into the hysteric voice like a hot knife through butter, drawing all attention to her, despite their focus on the heated truth pouring from the angel's lips. Having been interrupted and brought out of her monologue, the strange statement contorting her face in confusion before slowly morphing into realization. Love prospers when a fault is forgiven, but dwelling on it separates close friends. This time, Irina's voice was but a mere whisper, her features and muscles relaxing until her legs folded beneath her. She had long since memorized the entire Bible, and as such was easily able to pull the quote from her memory, as well as its intended message. The devils, hearing the holy words from God's book, flinched at the sudden throbbing in their skulls. Asia had forgotten that only Zenobia and her were immune from the pain holy words brought to the beings of the underworld. A small blush and a word of apology later, she returned her attention to the angel in the room. We want his forgiveness in order to rebuild the connection we had, and while I would love it if he saw fit to do so, I don't believe any of us expect him to give that to us so easily. But the Lord gave all of creation free will for a reason, Irina. Don't you think we have the right to exercise the gift he gave us and ask for his forgiveness? Following that logic, I should be allowed to at least try to stop you from going through with this. Asia had grown a backbone in the time following those events. It didn't happen all at once, but she was getting her voice out there more, instead of letting her king make the decisions for her. Whether it was distrust towards Rias or an attempt to changing herself, not even she knew the answer. The only thing she was certain of was that she was growing for the better. Asia dedicated herself to ingrain the mistake she made into her very soul, to ensure that something like this would never happen again. Irina. Asia walked over and helped the holy entity to her feet once more. What is the real reason you're stopping us? Everything you just said, did you not think those exact same things were going through our minds? Motioning to everyone, Irina's attention was brought to the rest of the peerage. All of them looked her in the eye, and the angel could see clear as day the pain hidden behind each one. No matter how hard we trained, no matter how much we wanted to push it away, it was those thoughts that motivated everyone to push themselves in their training. Some of us wanted the escape, others may have wanted to prevent something like that from ever happening again. Whatever the reason, every single one of us has had to listen to our own beratings for weeks on end. Nothing you have said is anything new to us, you know this. After all, you went through the exact same experience as we did. So, can you please tell us why you don't want us to see Issei? All of the energy that unstable angel had built seemed to just dissipate before the logical nun. No matter how hard Irina wanted to say something back, deep in the back of her head, she knew that Asia would have a rebuttal for whatever excuse she could possibly muster. I don't want to lose you guys. The reply came in the form of a hitched voice and hiccups. I may not have raised my hand when things got violent, but I also didn't try very hard to stop it. He needed help. And I refused to give it to him. If I can't forgive myself for that, how is Issei going to? I already lost him. And if you guys go out there, I'm afraid I will lose all of you too. The tears falling down her cheeks as she spoke were soon matched by the other two members of the holy trio, well educated on how innocent and pure she was. Outside of Rias and Asia, she was probably the one that was hurting the most. Even before she became a member of the church, she always wanted to help people despite the risks to herself. It was this selfless desire that convinced Michael to reincarnate her into an angel in the first place. But Issei had needed help. And she never noticed until it was too late. And even then, she did nothing to aid him, nothing to stop the fighting, she didn't even fly after him as he arsed across the sky. In her eyes, she had failed herself, failed as an angel, and most importantly, failed at being a friend. If Issei lost control again. The peerage couldn't help but walk over to the sobbing angel with a small smiles and wrapping their arms around her in a tight hug. As soon as they did that, the angel couldn't hold it in anymore, and those small drops of water flowing down her cheek turned into rivers. XXX. Where the hell is he? Almost every student in the courtyard had to cover their ears from the thunderous shout. Everyone in the kendo club gathered in the courtyard for the obligate MMHMM, the challenge Issei gave them. It was time, yet Issei wasn't here. Did he run away? Probably. It was the smart thing to do, who in their right mind would ask for a 1v20 kendo match? He probably ran away. A random member shouted from the crowd, unknowingly voicing Murayama's exact thoughts. It didn't take long for the others to join in. Yeah. The coward challenges us and then runs away. I say we find him and stick it to him. The chorus of approval echoed among the kendo club, however, there were two that didn't seem to join in on the war cry. I don't think that is it. What do you mean? Murayama and Caddis exchanged a look. Ever since Issei walked out of the clubroom, her best friend had seemed off for some reason. Was it because of the sudden change their peeper had? True, it was a rather unsettling to see the man that would spy on them while changing acting like he didn't live with his brain down his pants. Witnessing the well-renowned pervert standing up to Mitsuda and Motohama, saying that they would stop peeping no matter who won, the hickeys and nail marks decorating his body like a tapestry. It was kind of a turn on if she was being perfectly honest. The letter Issei gave us. Her best friend unknowingly dragged her out of some very disturbing thoughts. Said that he wanted to meet you, Kiryu, and I in private. The wooden sword in her hand started to suffer from an unnecessarily tight grip. He wants something from us. I don't know what it is, but he will show up and fight to get it. Murayama's eyelids rose, gaping at the outlandish idea coming out of her mouth. Caddis. You actually think he show up? Issei. The same man who has absolutely no combat experience whatsoever. The one we beat over and over again. This was answered with a very hard glance. Murayama. I think you should forget about the old Issei. Huh? What was Caddis going on about? This was Issei. A very sick person who got off on watching girls change. A piece of filth that dared to linger around the most popular women in school. The fucking coward even got his fangs into Kiba. Why would she ever forget all of the horrid acts he performed? Huh? What do you mean huh? Caddis's was now flat out glaring at her now. She was angry, no, livid with what she just heard. Were you not paying attention when he told everyone why he was gone for 3 months? He almost died Mamoru. People tend to change if something makes your life fly past your eyes. Murayama physically faltered as if she was just slapped in the face. To hear her first name used in such a scalding tone from the person she all but lived with hurt like nothing else could. Caddis wasn't yelling, but it wasn't hard to tell that she was more than just upset. Sorry. I didn't mean to snap at you. Caddis apologized with a deep breath while running her hand through her hair. It isn't like I don't know where you are coming from. For as long as we have known him, Issei has been kind of a scumbag. Then he comes back and we are supposed to believe he just isn't anymore. That's a hard pill to swallow. You have no idea how much I want to get in his face and tell him he is full of shit, but you saw what he looked like. The scratch marks on his back, the rings, the 3-month absence. As much as I hate to admit it, it adds up. But Murayama tried to object to her friend's reasoning but was cut off. Issei is a lot of things, Murayama, but he isn't a liar. But he. Caddis had her there. As vehemently as she wanted to deny everything and keep looking at him like the same old creeper he always was, Mamoru knew her friend was right. That boy was a lot of things in the eyes the female student body, but not a single one of them would ever call him a liar. Fine. You win. I'm not going to forget everything he has done. But if he keeps his word, and that is a big if, then I promise I will try. If goes back on his word or so much as tries to sneak a peek on us again, however, I am cutting that thing off and shoving it down his throat. The dramatic way she tried to force everything out as if she just drank soul milk alongside the healthy bravado pulled at Caddis's lips. If he does, you'll have to wait in line. We won't be the only ones that will be on top of him should he break his word. Caddis was about to end the conversation there, but Murayama reached out and grasped her sleeve before she could walk away. Thanks. For helping me get out of that mental fog. It's just that this entire scenario has thrown me for a loop. I mean, taking on all of us. She swept her hand in front of her to indicate all of the girls standing mere feet from them. At once. I don't blame you. Out of all the things he could have done, this wasn't even on the list. But looking back, I think I can understand why he is doing this. You can. The thought of understanding what went on in that pervert's skull just sent. Easy girl. Caddis just pulled you out of that. We have a match coming up. Bad mental has no place here. Think about it. Every time the perverted trio tried something with us, we would beat them black and blue, right? But, according to the school rules, violence is prohibited. More so, we hit them with our swords, and we both know how bad these hurt. To get hit repeatedly by a mob with these. But Issei shouldn't have peeked either. Murayama pointed out with a raised finger. That is sexual harassment. On top of that, we have a right to defend ourselves. An entire group of armed women need to defend themselves against 3 unarmed men. That isn't defending ourselves and you know it. Well, when you put it like that. What made it worse is that Murayama couldn't help but agree with Caddis's rebuttal. We should have went straight to the student council. Caddis continued with a hint of regret in her voice. Instead, we decided to play judge, jury, and executioner. If that is what this is about, then it makes sense why Issei wants this to happen. He wants revenge. But what about Kiryu? Why is she included in all of this? What did she do to him? You'll find out when I take my win. Everyone's head turned to face the school gates where a figure could be seen leaning against a stone wall, with one leg wrapped around the other. With the attention of everyone in the courtyard on mystery person, said individual stepped out the shade the overhanging tree provided. A male adolescent of average height gave them a half smirk as he made his way over to them. His messy brown hair shone a bright gold in the setting sun, and the casual wine purple shirt decorated with amethyst was taut against his skin, contrasting with the thin and baggy ebony-colored sweats. Issei had finally arrived. About time you showed up. A predatory smirk spread across a random girl in the crowd, one that was matched by every single member of the club. Now that their victim had finally showed, all of the onlookers began to wrap around the to-be combatants. If you want to run away now, no one would blame you. Issei. Running away. If he did, we would most certainly blame him. Naya. He would never live it down. We wouldn't let him. To use your own words, Issei is a lot of things, but a liar is not one of them. Once again hearing unknown voices on school property, everyone once again turned in the direction they came from, only to see three feminine shadows walking under the overhang mere feet from where Issei was leaning on the wall. As they stepped out of the blinding rays of the setting sun, the students grew more and more anxious. Murayama simply watched with a blank look as the girls took their time walking over to where Issei was. The strangers all seemed quite familiar with the brown-haired pervert, claiming cowardice didn't suit him and that they would hold him accountable themselves if he ran away. Who were they? They couldn't be the three wives he told them about during class, right? Right. Since not a single one of them appeared to be in any hurry, Murayama took the opportunity to get a good look at each of them. The leader of the three had significant assets, hair the color of midnight that flowed down her back in illustrious waves, and sported a majestic kimono that seemed to demand attention be given to its wearer. The one in the center was the polar opposite. A girl with snow draping down her back, matching skin, and bright yellow eyes. What made a lot of them do a double take was that she was wearing their school uniform. Was this girl a classmate of theirs? She kind of looked like Kaneko, but that couldn't be right. The last time Murayama saw her, there was no sign of her chest getting bigger or her bottom popping out. This attractive female had visible mounds on her chest and some junk in the trunk. There was no way it could be her. Could it? No, it had to be a sibling. But wouldn't someone have noticed before today? The last one didn't fall behind in comparison to the other two. An absolutely stunning foreigner with blonde hair and blue eyes, showing off her tight butt with a pair of form-fitting jeggings and a snow-white top that hugged her body to the point where nothing was left to the imagination. A shudder. Murayama's body convulsed like cold water was poured down her spine. As if on impulse, her eyes were drawn straight to the man of the hour. Brown met gold, and a strange sense of calm came over her. It's almost time. Right beside her, Cadis drew her sword and raised it, signaling the other girls to begin drawing there as well. Murayama merely tightened her grip on her sheath. XXX. Issei couldn't help but offer the lovely ladies a heartfelt smile as they drew closer. While Kuroka decided to have her share of intimacy for the day, Shirin took Lafay out shopping for her current outfit, leaving the men of the Vali group to do as they pleased. Since it was decided that Arthur and Lafay were joining them into the other dimension alongside Biku, Issei had been worried about their humane lifespans until the older Pendragon assured him that such worries were irrelevant. Naturally confused, the dragon couldn't help but inquire as to how long their lifespan was. Lafay was the one who revealed that, thanks to the Lady of the Lake's blessing for properly returning Excalibur to her way back when, the Pendragon family was able to boast an astonishing 500 years. It's been a while, Issei. The younger yokai took her place in front of disguised dragon with an unusual sway to her movements. Before the boy could inquire as to why, Shirin had already pulled his head down for a lengthy kiss. Every individual in the courtyard went wild with exclamations, the boys whooping or shouting in objection, girls blushing at such a blatant act of romance before a massive audience, while the kendo club simply gawked. Murayama and Cadis expressed the least reaction with only narrowed eyes and a raised eyebrow respectively. Kiryu, who was no doubt somewhere in this massive mob, was probably having the time of her life watching this. Not a single complaint was raised from the victim of affection. Wrapping his arm around her waist and cupping the side of her head, Issei deepened the loving kiss before pulling back. Really, Shirin? We've been apart for mere hours. I thought you would be happy to get me out of your hair. Honey Gold gazed up into his chocolate eyes before the beautiful color vanished as the girl pressed her lips into his neck. You? Never. Knowing full well that her time in the limelight was over, the devil shimmied to the side to make way for the bubbly witch, who also seemed to sport an extra hop in her step. Were they his thought process cut out as something was suddenly thrust inside his mouth? The Pendragon didn't even spare enough time to greet him before giving the audience a showing consisting of her Frenching her husband. While the multitude of exclamations sounded off in the background, the kiss ended with a pop several moments later. "How does my outfit look, Issei-sama?" she asked before wrapping the very confused male into a tight hug that left her assets pressing nicely into him. I'm sorry, what?" was all that he seemed to be able to come up with, much to the pleasure of the molester of his mouth. "Ahaha, did I kiss you senseless, Issei-sama? You certainly caught me off guard, Fei, and your outfit just makes you look. Wow." He actually couldn't come up with a decent word to express how positively gorgeous she looked. Her clothes seemed to make all of her curves just stand out, as if she wanted to. So that's how it was. "Now get over there before I do something I might not regret." He motioned towards Shirin, and Fei easily did as she was instructed whilst laughing and blushing at the insinuations behind his last words. Baroka's entrance didn't have the energy the other two did, nor did she kiss him like her sister wives. What the black yokai offered to him instead was a loving embrace accompanied with her snuggling into his chest, the aroma of freshly scented hair after a shower gracing his nose. The overwhelming gentle and cute side of the seductive Nekomata never failed to make Issei's heart skip a beat. He returned the gesture and enjoyed the trace amounts of vanilla filling his nose. "You really told them to show off, didn't you?" Issei whispered into the Nekomata's ear. Never before had he known or seen Shirin, much less Fei, emphasize their hips that much. The following chuckle confirmed his suspicions. "We have been cooped up in the other dimension for decades doing grueling amounts of training. Of course we're going to pretty ourselves up and drape ourselves over you. We had to make it clear that you are taken, and what better way than to show off?" Issei couldn't help but ask the obvious question. "Why didn't you go with them then?" Watching the way her lips slowly curled up into a smile, Issei knew she had a plan. "Because then I wouldn't have my darling husband's opinion." Now it was his turn to get a small laugh in. "Fair enough, I need to get some things for myself so that works out great. Now then." Issei separated himself from the hug and stepped forward, the girls taking up the space he had been in before. "It's time." As if some sort of indication was made, Issei starting walking forward the same time as two of the kendo club did. As they drew closer to one another, the dragon couldn't help but wonder what happened to all the noise he had to endure during his wife's acts of affection. Shouldn't the rest of his opposition be yelling for his blood and the crowd calling for him to die for having three very attractive women? Now in equal distance from both groups of women stood Murayama, Caddis, and Issei. What was surprising to see was the relatively nonchalant expressions on the two girls' faces. Were they focusing on the upcoming battle? "Are you intending on taking all of us without a sword?" Were they not going to inquire about the women he just shared rather bold moments with? They must really be pushing to get this show on the road. Issei took a moment to ponder on Caddis's question after seeing how serious they were. The humans were already irreparably disadvantaged. Contesting one of the strongest existences in reality, so using his sword skills would be overkill. Whether he chose to destroy them or allow them victory. No, Issei wasn't that kind. The whole purpose of this is to find out what kind of sacred gears the club's brass had. Once that was achieved, he would crush them. Kiryu also seems to have something stashed away inside of her, but he was going to find that out regardless of the outcome. When he was reading off the challenge to these two, the female pervert didn't seem adverse to the terms of meeting up with him. Sooner or later, Issei would find out what made her special. "I was actually hoping you would have a spare lying around. Might as well use this opportunity to warm up for when the bigger fish want to bite." But the thought of his inevitable rematch with the local devils dancing in his head, Issei turned to see the girl's part to reveal someone bringing the spare he requested. Offering an arm towards her, he couldn't suppress the uncomfortable feeling holding the insignificant piece of wood gave him. "That is because you have gotten too used to real weapons, ones that hold real power. Your pride as a dragon won't allow you to consider what you hold a stick, much less a sword." Issei Haidu, who has been on the giving and receiving end of powers capable of killing angels, devils, and dragons, could not help but agree with Ophis. Proper weapons shouldn't feel so hollow, so fragile, so empty. Just holding this abnormally large sliver was stirring up his more negative emotions. "Let's get this over with already." The black dragon spun on his heel to retreat to his original position against the comfortable stone. "Are we actually doing this?" A random voice questioned from within the mob of females eager for the bloodbath to begin. "What if the student council tries to stop us?" "Well, I appreciate that at least some of you have a small respect for the rules, now hardly seems like the time to start abiding by them." A small smile spread across the dragon's face after hearing this new voice. It was a strange thing for him to actually feel calmer hearing a girl outside of his wife speak. Nevertheless, he was grateful to the Citri heiress. If he had gone to battle with feelings of disgust and frustration, the dragon might have let some of his powers slip, and a reenactment of what happened last time was the last thing the Ouroboros wanted. The student body parted ways to reveal a stern Sona Citri and the rest of the student council members, slowly forming a perimeter around the combatants. I will personally supervise this event. We have been brought up to speed on the terms of this battle as well. While you may beat on Issei as you please, if we see him deliver a point, the pointed individual will be removed from the contest. I trust that everyone finds this acceptable. Although it was phrased as a question, the look in her eyes and the sound of her voice heavily indicated otherwise. A chorus of yes and yes ma'am rang from the overeager females. Good. Now then, Issei, are you ready? Yeah. Girls, are you ready? The familiar chorus answered once again with yes and yes ma'am. Then. Begin. XXX. What the student body witnessed could only be described as impossible. Right out of the gate, the girls beelined for the man in front of them, eager to be the first to lay into him. The audience expected him to be running for his life or, hell, dashing in to meet them halfway. What they didn't expect to see was for Issei to simply stand still, even when they got close enough to hit him. Once the first member of the kendo club was about to strike the first blow, he leaned to the side a split second before the sword flashed through where his head had been, hit the girl who was falling from putting too much weight behind her weapon, and retreated before anyone else could react. The women who did see what happened could only stop their advance in sheer bewilderment, while those that failed to notice charged none the wiser. Those tunnel vision fools were met with the same fate that happened to the first one. Dodge, retaliate, back away. This repeated up until the fourth tried her luck and failed, leaving everyone else confused and weary. No one knew what was going on. Issei had only ever displayed athleticism when he was running away from the kendo club after he was caught peeking. How was he doing this? How skilled in kendo was he? We all know Issei watches them change, but did he also watch their practices as well? A random student murmured from the audience. Is that how he learned to do this? That is going a bit far, don't you think? As the numerous people watching the event unfold attempted to come up with explanations for what they were seeing, the devil peerages watched with calculating gazes. Every single one of them could tell that something about him was off before this clash between man and women started. What they were witnessing now only drove that point home even further. He isn't wasting a single movement. Zenobia had tasked herself with memorizing the way he fought, looking for any openings he left or habits he could exploit. Rias wasn't exactly pleased with what she heard, but couldn't bring herself to deny her subordinate. If Issei did lash out at them again like last time, they would need to be ready. She had her doubts that this fight would reveal anything significant but chose not to voice them. Before, he would just blow through everything with pure power. Kiba couldn't deny that Zenobia had a point. As individuals who fought on the front lines, the two of them were aware of how the smallest mistakes could end a battle. It didn't matter to them if Issei was weaker or stronger than before. If there was the slightest chance of a repeat from last time, they would eagerly study his every movement to tilt the scale in their favor. But now it seems like he has taken up training in fighting technique. Couldn't it be because that the girls are just slow? The fallen devil hybrid had a decent point. Every single supernatural entity present is faster than the girls, cautiously eyeing the ex-Welsh Dragon. The show Issei was putting on could easily be replicated by any one of them, even for those not focusing on the more physical form of combat. It was difficult to tell if his footwork was just a fancy nothing or actually held some kind of purpose. That could be. Kiba conceded. However, that footwork seems a bit too natural and practiced. I think it would be safer if we all overestimate him than underestimate him. We have all seen him perform feats that shouldn't be possible, after all. It looks. The blonde bishop cut into the knight's analysis of Issei's potential fight skills. Like Issei doesn't want the girls to touch him, even though those swords can't hurt him. Well, that can't be it. Akeno decided to join the conversation. We all know how he acts when girls show interest in him. Plus, it's Issei's dream to become a harem king. Was Akeno? All the pain and regret Rias endured rose to the surface with that simple sentence. That was his dream. And because of me. Issei and Kaneko sided with Chaos Brigade. That might be going a bit too far, Rias Onasama. Asia stopped that thought dead in its tracks. And it isn't because of you. It was because of us. We didn't have to follow through with your plan. We chose to do what we did of our own violation. All of us are to blame for this. It was strange how a few words from the underworld's most innocent devil could completely heal a person. She didn't need a sacred gear to do it, all she need do is speak, and the listener would feel redeemed once she was finished. Just looking at her made her think of an angel with a devil's wings. You're right. I'm sorry. I just can't seem to get over what happened is all. You should. While I am happy that you guys are doing a lot better than the last time we saw each other, I would appreciate it if you would focus on the task at hand. The president really was pleased that her friend and her peerage were getting over their mistakes and all, but they had plenty of chances to do that before the target arrived. Additionally, if the cards were in their favor, there would be plenty of chances afterward as well. Because once he is done with them, it's our turn. Sona's words were only somewhat harsh. All of them knew that this wasn't the time, with Issei literally in front of them, but the pain still lingered in their hearts. What Irina said turned out to be true. A couple of months is simply not enough to recover from trauma. For Issei, it was his friends betraying him. For the Gremory peerage, it was witnessing what had become of their loved one, knowing that they were responsible. But like Sona said, now wasn't the time. With newfound determination, they returned their attention to the fight and waited for their turn to confront the man they turned their backs on. XXX. The annoyed dragon patiently waited for his opponents to resume their reckless charge against him. After a solid minute, he was pleased to see the female adversaries taking up a more cautious approach. They held their sticks at the ready while slowly encircling him. As they surrounded him, Issei couldn't help but notice their lack of proper footwork and disgustingly tight grips on their hilts. If Arthur was here right now, he would throw a literal fit at the absolute lack of respect for their swords. Curiously glancing over towards the younger Pendragon, it seemed she was also holding in quite a bit of disappointment. Now that Issei let the kendo members finish their encirclement, they all struck on a cue that Issei didn't bother paying attention for. While the weapons slowly stabbed their way through the air towards his chest, the dragon took a squat that was barely perceived by the humans and spun. The outstretched blade struck all 10 or so of them in their calves, harder than he had intended, knocking every single one of them off their feet. At best, they would have black and blue bruises and at worst a broken bone. There were still a few members besides the main course, but they made the wise decision in dropping their weapons and backing off. In the short span of a couple minutes, only 3 were still standing. The ever-present breeze was the only comfort the dragon had. Fighting these weaklings with a mere stick was far more unappealing than he initially thought. Now that it was time to savor the main course, his hopes rose only a tiny bit. If the skills the Fallen had shown were any indication, then he would just end this here and now. Do you two want to call it quits too? Issei was going to find out what sacred gears they had hidden away one way or the other, so it really didn't matter if this farce continued. He couldn't quite decide which one he wanted more, however. For them to flee so he can snap this piece of crap into twigs, or for them to fight and hope that once he got God's gifts to manifest in them, that the two humans would give him a proper challenge, despite how unlikely the possibility was. Murayama and Caddis did not respond to his inquiry. Their facial expressions were that of indifference, as the sound of footfalls muffled by grass came without a moment's notice. Were they not bothered by what he had done to their peers? No. That wasn't it. Both pairs of eyes had a strange lack of life to them, kind of like Biku's when he was preoccupied with something serious. Were they seriously going to fight him distracted? Or were they blocking out all forms of distraction to focus on the battle? With a ping of annoyance, Issei pulled his arm up for a half-hearted swing. Only for it to get deflected by Caddis. Oh? The flash of white came from behind the blocker, and Issei stepped back to see a piece of wood where his head had been. Raising his weapon down on Caddis, Murayama performed a similar maneuver to redirect his blow. Alright, Issei thought happily, seeing that his remaining adversaries were not so easily put down as the rest. Guess it's time to get some more practice in. Near his foot was a sword that one of the people he pointed left. With how fast Issei could go, even with both girls nearly on top of him, it was child's play to get his foot under the pathetic weapon and flip it into his arm in time to block both horizontal slashes. Now that Issei had acquired a second sword, both opponents pulled back for a series of coordinated strikes at his crotch, throat, and various other locations on his body that would be rather painful for ordinary males. Issei countered each strike with ease, constantly keeping track of the power in his blocks and counters. It wouldn't be good to simply knock them out so soon after all. All of the club members were cheering on Caddis and Murayama as they never ceased their coordinated onslaught of attacks on Issei's stationary body. One of them was always trying to get into his blind spot, while the other attempted to keep him distracted with a flurry of attacks. Needless to say, each and every single blow the two attempted was blocked effortlessly despite their constant repositioning. Start dodging, Ophis instructed her vessel, with the boy doing as he was told. Still on the defensive, Issei began to duck and weave under their relentless volley of attempts to hit him. He was still rather uncomfortable with evasive maneuvers when dual wielding, so Ophis's idea to get some reps in with that as well made sense. After several more minutes of constantly evading and occasionally blocking their offensive, Issei noticed Murayama overextending her swing in an attempt to catch him backpedaling. Blocking an overhead from Caddis, the dragon stepped forward with an overhead of his own. Murayama was barely able to block in time. The force behind this particular attack far exceeded what he had been using. He could even see her arms shaking from the shock of blocking such a heavy blow. turning his attention to Caddis momentarily as she rushed him in an attempt to get Murayama out of the pinch she was in. Issei began to would if their little dance would be enough for their sacred gears to manifest. When he first unlocked the double critical state of the Welsh Dragon, he was attacked by Calwarner and remembered Rias' advice. Focusing on the part of your body you feel is the strongest. Despite her telling him that all he had to do at the time was focus, Issei was certain that something else was needed. Back then, he was genuinely afraid he was going to die. Was that the key? Threatening their life. It certainly wasn't something he was willing to do, least of all in the middle of this mass of humans and devils alike. What about other strong emotions like anger? After making his decision, Issei let Murayama return to her feet while he struck at the other girl with a force equivalent to overhead. Seeing the attack coming, Caddis rolled out of the way and made sure her friend was okay via whisper. Both of you are going to lose at this rate. Issei noticed the grimaces on their faces, telling him that both of them knew he was being truthful and absolutely hating the idea. So I am going to give the two of you a chance. We don't need any handicaps to beat you. The dead looks had vanished to reveal the frustration and anger in their gazes. Murayama, don't let him get under your skin. Caddis scolded her comrade, but Issei could tell she agreed with her. Really? You think you can make me bleed? When I haven't received so much as a single scratch. Adopting a slightly more serious expression, Issei lowered himself into a proper stance for the first time since the start of this little event. His legs were bent and his left arm hung limp, while his left was pulled back with the sword pointing at Caddis. I'll only tell you this once. If you want to have any chance of winning this little contest of ours, then you need focus. You think we haven't? Correct. At the very least, you're doing a piss poor job. This time, focus on cutting me with your sword and not the dirt you've been eating. Why you? Having fallen for his goading, Murayama charged with a reckless abandon exactly like Issei wanted. Before she could even make it halfway to him, Issei suddenly thrust out his arm. Crack. Ah. Murayama fell to her knees instantly, the forward momentum she had built absolutely obliterated. You cracked my rib. How did you do that? From over 10 feet away? That is the difference in our strengths. Issei answered as he stood back up and confidently made his way over to her. When I thrust out my arm, the force behind it traveled through the air and hit you. Truth be told though, I didn't mean to crack your rib. That is my B, but do you see now? You lack focus. You started out well enough, but the moment you were pushed into a corner you just stopped. Do you even want to win this anymore? Of course I do. Her attempt at shouting was met with a violent coughing to which Issei couldn't help but shake his head. The dragon stood over her with his stick pointing at her throat. You don't act like it. Look at Caddis. Murayama painfully did as she was told despite her reluctance to do anything the pervert instructed. What she saw was a far cry from what she was used to seeing in her friend. She wants to hurt me. You can see it plain as day in those eyes and the way she is gripping her hilt, not to mention that snarl is downright terrifying. The only reason she hasn't done anything about it is because she is worried about you. Or trying to get the jump on me while I'm distracted talking to you. I don't know her that well. The girl in question couldn't help but swear that she had been noticed and didn't bother trying to get a sneak attack in anymore. Her sword dragged in the grass while she stalked closer to the two. Get away from her. The sheer amount of anger in her voice alone was enough to raise a singular eyebrow on Issei's head. Was she seriously that upset that he hurt her? The dragon's lips curled up into an evil smirk, a plan formulating inside his brain. Kneeling down to the downed female, Issei grabbed a fistful of her hair and yanked it back so she was staring into his eyes. The gasp of pain was exactly what he was looking for, glancing over at the now thoroughly enraged woman charging at him with everything she had. Before she could get close enough to hit him, however, he quickly whispered a few words to the student below him. Focus everything you have into your sword. You might actually hurt me that way. If you don't, I might do something unethical to Caddis. I'm sure you know exactly what I mean by that. Issei jumped out of the way of the wrathful stick intent on smashing his skull into a bloody mess, the attack itself barely missing the one Caddis was trying to protect. Issei backed up until there were at least several yards between them, while Caddis checked on Murayama. As he waited for their attention to be brought back to him, an icy sensation poured down his spine like water. He knew the bloodlust was coming from his wife's anger for threatening perverted acts. He would deal with that later since both of his opponents were on their feet and ready for round 2. No. That wasn't it. They wanted this to end. Now. Threatening illicit acts on Caddis to anger Murayama. Caddis's rage at the way you were treating Murayama. Their fear of what happened should they fail. You purposefully fueled their emotions so they would hit you with everything they have. And the talk about focusing their everything into their swords. If those sacred gears are going to awaken at all, it is going to be now. And if they don't? You son of a bitch. A voice filled with malice interrupted his talk with the Ouroboros. As he turned towards the speaker, he couldn't help but notice that her sword was starting to glow. Not only did you injure her. That shining vibrancy grew. Not only did you pull her hair. And grew. But now you want to assault me? And grew into a dark black and blue that illuminated the surrounding area. Murayama was right, you haven't changed. No, you are worse than you were before. Cadis held out her weapon in a manner promising pain. You shouldn't be allowed to walk freely in this world. I am going to kill you here and now so you don't get the chance to hurt anyone else. Judging on the sheer hatred in Murayama's eyes, she wanted to give him a small speech as well, if not for the pain in her ribs, preventing her from doing so. Instead, she settled for grabbing a nearby kendo stick and dropped down into a dual-wielding stance that promised great suffering. The sword in her hand, as well as the one she had just picked up, was also glowing brightly. The only difference was that the two blades were glowing red and black in comparison to Cadis's blue. Doesn't look like I need to worry about that. If you think you can, then bring it. Issei welcomed the challenge with great fervor. He wasn't sure what these sacred gears were and couldn't say they would give him a satisfactory battle, but he hoped. He so desperately wanted to test the skills he learned on someone he hadn't fought thousands and thousands of times. The enraged females needed no further encouragement, dashing towards him ignorant of the state of their weapons. The muffled footfalls were like music to his ears, and he also readied his stick, the human weapon glowing black as he ran draconic energy through it. Just as he was about to clash against the two, the sword's glow began to fade, and in their retreating brilliance, Issei was able to identify what their sticks had become. Muramasa. Murasum. And Dane's leaf. All of the excitement that was coursing through Issei's veins vanished in a mere instant. Faster than any human or devil present could react, a hand reached out and stopped Dane's leaf swing before Issei's turn to slits, releasing a portion of the power he held for the quickest of moments. The effect was instant. Every single human in the area fell like a puppet with its strings. Several tens of bodies hit the ground just as fast as Issei's heart did, upon witnessing the sacred gears of his interests. You made the correct call. Ophis attempted to raise his spirits once more with praise on his decision-making. Neither of them are capable of wielding their sacred gears to an acceptable degree. Not only would they destroy themselves, but the surrounding humans as well. There was no answer for the Ouroboros. Issei turned towards the familiar voice to see Sona, Rias, and their respective peerages approaching him. What happened? These two had sacred gears. Issei saw no reason to deny the Citri and answered. I wanted to awaken them. Why? She pressed on. Did you forget that there were humans watching? Did you forget that we are capable of making them forget? We can't just keep using memory magic on them. Tsubaki snapped at him for the barbed comeback he gave her king. If we do, we run all kinds of risks. Like what? Tsubaki seemed startled that she was so suddenly put on the spot, having trouble coming up with a suitable answer off the top of her head. This pressure she was feeling coming off of him in waves wasn't helping her state of mind either. Easy, Issei. I understand you are upset, but don't take it out on them. It isn't their fault you couldn't have a decent fight. Issei. Rias took her turn to speak, ignorant of the deity's words, and walking closer than the others dared to. You look like you were happy this morning, and even seemed to be enjoying yourself just a few minutes ago. Why are you acty? Boom. An explosion originating from the former Grimory pawn blasted Rias off of her feet, as well as sent dirt and grass speeding through the air, and even cracked the concrete walls. An aura of black and purple energy materialized around the boy, a mysterious, dangerous yet beautiful veil of energy dancing to its own tune. While the sound of an explosion in such close proximity to normal humans could provide quite nasty for their hearing, the devils did not seem to be affected by such a loud noise in point-blank range. Whether the devils were protected against certain amounts of noise pollution or they were too focused on coming to the aid of their king, Issei didn't know. The girl with crimson hair shook her head to erase the shaking sensation from her head, raising a hand to her temple as she looked at Issei in disbelief, as did the others. He was scowling at her. I would appreciate it if you don't try to casually approach me like you did nothing wrong, Rias. You are far from deserving of it. As he spoke, the energy that clung to him slowly shrank into an eerie luminescence. It was obvious from the way the devils shrank away from him that they weren't prepared for the hostility the former pawn gave them. Surely they anticipated some amount of anxiety and anger, but not the full brunt of the full dragons. The girls and Gasper, who had quickly moved to assure themselves of Ria's condition, retreated out of fear. The only exceptions of the group were Rias, who was on the ground, Akeno, who stood defiantly with a single leg positioned slightly behind her acting as support against his explosion of power, and Kiba, who seemed to be expecting something like this. Seeing that the peerage was backing away from their king, Akeno stepped up to help Rias regain her footing, while Kiba took his spot between his king and Issei. A recently conjured holy demonic sword was held tightly in a single arm. The nervous sweat on his brow was an obvious sign of his emotional state, but despite his evident fear, he still took up his sword to protect his king. Issei, as upset as he was about being denied his anticipated fight, couldn't help but admire his courage and bravery. Maybe Kiba could give him the battle he was lusting for. Do you really intend to fight me, Kiba? I'm not going to tell you shouldn't, but I am also not going to tell you should either. Attack me if that will make you feel better. Just be prepared to accept the consequences of your actions. While delivering his declaration, Issei straightened himself and took a few steps forward, shattering the kendo sword simply by closing his fist around the hilt. Seeing him advance, Kiba braced himself and conjured a blade that even Issei was surprised to see. Ascalon. The sword forged from God for Uriel rested in one hand, while the holy demonic sat in the other with Kiba squatting down into a stance. Another dual wielder with supernatural blades that weren't nearly dangerous enough as those others. Looks like he was going to get that fight after all. What is going on here? Everyone looked towards the direction the voice had come from. There were two people walking out of a crimson magic circle, one with red hair with shoulder plates and a flowing cape, while the other wore a blue maid outfit and had silver hair. Ani-sama. Grafia. Rias exclaimed, not understanding why they were here, but grateful that they were. The peerage just looked on as the newcomers stepped out of their magic circle. Serziches seemed to understand the look on Ria's face and explained why he was here, quickly switching his attention to Issei with a frown. When we rebuilt the school, we included a variety of sensors to notify us in the event anything of significance occurred. When the Citri family informed me you were here, I made sure everyone was ready in the event things turned for the worse. When the supernatural seismic sensor went off just now, we came as fast as we could. Rias simply stood with her allies with a look that spoke of shocked acceptance. Knowing her, she was probably put off by the fact that these devices were planted in the school without her authorization or knowing. Issei, for one, was absolutely ecstatic with all anger and frustration forgotten. Forget Kiba, he wanted to fight Serziches now. Then he remembered the explanation the super devil gave, and Issei couldn't stop himself from chuckling. A supernatural seismic sensor. Did you honestly show up just because a single machine gave off an insignificant seismic reading? I am going to apologize in advance for this, but isn't it a little too protective of you, Serziches? Normally, I would agree with you. Issei turned around to witness Ajuka Beelzebub stepping out of his custom magic circle wearing his signature poker face. But it seems the emergency Satan summons is going to be at least worth the trouble it took for all of us to get here. Ah, geez. To the left of the former peerage member, a certain devil dressed in her signature magical girl uniform was pouting cutely with her arms extended to the ground in front of her. With her was her little sister, still dressed in her school uniform. Issei couldn't help but sweat a little as he gazed at the newest newcomers. Does she always wear her uniform? Does she seriously have no other clothes? I was in the middle of a recording, Serziches. Seraphil pouted cutely as she stuck her tongue out at the Lucifer, waving her arms sporadically as she did so. Why did you even call the emergent? It was then that her attention was finally drawn to the boy in the center of the three super devils. Her entire demeanor changed in less than a second. The flash of light and gone was the magical girl clothes, in their place was an emerald business suit and a knee-length skirt that was several shades darker. I believe an explanation is required. I too would desire to be briefed on the current state of matters. A voice could be heard from above. As everyone looked into the sky, they watched as the misshapen balls of various color begin to glow a brilliant tangerine as the sky seemed to split. From the sky, a man of unsurpassed grace floated downwards, gently touching down several feet beside Issei with a frown on his face, taking one of the few empty spots in the immediate area. It was not often that the archangel showed something besides upward turned lips, so this sight was very unusual to the young devils. I was led to believe that Issei Haidu had died or became a stray. Yet, he stands before me very much alive and without any demonic energy. It certainly is strange, isn't it, Michael? Another individual stepped out from behind the leader of the angels and walked over to the spot next to Ajuka and Seraphil, surrounding the should-be dead man in a hexagon formation. The original alchemist was smiling with the downfall dragon spear bouncing up and down on his extended palm. Under normal circumstances, he should very well be dead. I don't even know if anyone has ever removed a sacred gear and survived the ordeal. Azazel's characteristic smile faded with a new air of seriousness. It shouldn't be possible. That leads me to the conclusion of him having some form of help. Revival and brainwash aren't that far out of the picture either. Perhaps Chaos Brigade has something to do with Issei's return. Beelzebub addressed the fallen angel, no doubt analyzing a number of algorithms and various memories he had on him in his head to find the most likely reason for the resurrection of the former Red Dragon Emperor. The super devil got no response from Azazel, who acknowledged his colleague's words and did not count it out of the realm of possibility. Issei observed his surroundings, calculating his next course of action. He did not anticipate coming face to face with almost every leader of the three powers so soon. Additionally, he was still unable to use Ophis' full power without repercussions, and his base form wouldn't be enough to tangle with one of them, let alone all of them, should they choose to gang up on him. At least it isn't boring. Damn it, Vali. Sorry, but you're both wrong. Azazel. Ajuka. Issei calmly denied the two leaders their hypotheses, not changing his posture in the slightest save for taking his arms out of his pockets and shifting his weight to his other leg. Sorry, kid. Azazel smiled again, resting the spear in his hands. But I am going to need a little more to go on besides a simple denial. Ajuka nodded in agreement as he, Azazel, Michael, and Seraphol moved to stand beside Surzich's, confident on their ability to stop Issei from running, should he choose to. Rias and her peerage remained standing a few yards away from the main gates, unable to draw their attention away from the interaction happening in front of them. But Lucifer, despite the accusations his friends made, decided to keep a more open mind. So, are you saying that you are truly Issei Haidu and not some mindless puppet? Yeah. Said person replied. The one and only. But Azazel and Ajuka are right when they say that I am different. I think Azazel was closest when he said I had help and that I was revived. Damn it. The Beelzebub muttered under his breath with the fallen angel grinning in victory. You owe me a bloody Manhattan. Azazel told his fellow friend and rival, pleased that he had won their apparent bet. Ajuka started muttering something about Azazel and why he couldn't just lust for bodies other than knowledge like the rest of his kind. But Ajuka was also right as my help and revival came in the form of the Cows Brigade. Ha! Ajuka exclaimed, this time it was Azazel who was muttering. You owe me unholy tequila. This made an eyebrow raise on Haidu's face. The bloody Manhattan I can comprehend. But the fuck is unholy tequila? Questions for later. Surzich's decided to ignore his friend's betting on his sister's ex-pawn until later. Just as he was about to ask another question, Seraphol interrupted him. But why would they help you? What could you provide the Cows Brigade with to encourage them that you were worth the effort to keep alive? You have it backwards, Sarah. Issei told her, shortening her name to Sarah because her name was so unusual to say fully, annoying the girl in question as the Tan was not present. It isn't about what I could do for her, but what we could do for each other. I was able to give her something in exchange for my body and soul. This got the attention of everyone present, including the two supernatural scientists, as well as the Gremory peerage plus Sona. However, Rias, her pieces, and Sona noticed something different from what the leaders did. Her. The Leviathan was visibly taken aback by this new information, stepping back with widened eyes and covering her mouth with a single hand. This didn't last long as she took 2 steps forward to voice her denial of his choice, only to be blocked by Michael's arm as he called out to the boy. You gave the Cows Brigade your body and soul. What for? You realize that as long as they have it, you are subject to their every will and whim for all of eternity, right? What could possibly be worth that much? Issei exhaled a tired sigh, beginning to grow tired of trying to tell them his story. I don't expect any of you to understand, and honestly, I don't think you all would understand if I just said it through words either. Perhaps showing you would be quicker. As the boy trailed off, he bent his elbow and raised up his left arm so that the flat of his fist was directed away from his body, the fingers only an inch or 2 away from his shoulder. I'll show you my sacred gear. This declaration was met with a sharp intake of air from everyone present. Impossible. Seraphol whispered in disbelief. You shouldn't be in possession of the boosted gear. Ajuka was equally as shocked as his fellow Satan. He also spoke out once he compassed himself as best as he could. You cut off the arm that you have the dragon with Ascalon, somehow severing his connection with Drake and breaking the seal that was placed on heavenly dragons. That bluff will serve you no good here. Really? Issei couldn't help but smirk at their ignorance despite the situation he found himself in. He actually didn't think they would react the way they did. Hell, he was surprised his words got a reaction out of them at all. Were they scared that he might have managed to acquire something even stronger than Drake? Azazel picked up where Ajuka left off. As absurd as that last part is, it's impossible for you to have another sacred gear, Issei. You should know that firsthand, right, Issei? Since you not only cut out Drake, but also the devil pieces you had in you, you're only a— he paused briefly, earning a quick glance from Azazel before he too widened his eyes in realization. Human. Both scientists exclaimed at the same time. Michael immediately understood what they meant by that. God's system makes it so only humans can acquire sacred gears. Issei was a devil, but when he cut off the part of his soul that Drake inhabited, he also managed to cut out the evil pieces he had inside of him, turning him back into a normal human. Making it possible for him to acquire another sacred gear. Seraphol finished in shocked horror. Issei had paused his actions to listen in on the logic of the leaders and found himself to be quite impressed. I must say that I am surprised you guys were able to come up with that much. Azazel and Ajuka aside, I didn't expect that out of any of you. Honestly, I'm surprised Sarah was even able to keep up. Did you just call me dumb? Said Devil exclaimed, reverting back to her magical girl attitude. I am a Satan. Of course I can keep up with that much. Call me that again, and I will blow you all the way to Kingdom Come. Do you hear me? This response seemed to be amusing to the human, since a few loud chuckles managed to escape his lips. Hahaha. I am going to have to ask you not to do that. I already got blowed to Kingdom Come before I got here. Chances are I'm going to get blowed to Kingdom Come again once all of this is over. This left the vast majority of the populace confused and puzzled, save for the only two fallen angels present. One of them hoped her thoughts were wrong, while the other was clapping the boy's back proudly in his head despite the situation. But I should say something before the secret is out. Issei told all of them to get their attention back. I say sacred gear. But she only acts like one, so she has less work to do and more silence to enjoy. Before anyone could ask what Issei meant by his latest statement, everything became silenced as two words pierced the air. Balance. Break. Ouroboros Dragon. Balance breaker. Everyone in the immediate area was blinded by the brightest blackest light. The sensation was equivalent to looking at the sun. The only difference was that the sun is not black with small shimmers of purple energy. The devils, fallen angel, and angel, as well as the one and only hybrid present, averted their eyes to avoid further irritation of their eyes. However, this was the only reason why Azazel and Michael blocked the black light. The devils, however, tried to shield themselves from the black light with their hand and arms, the apocalyptic sun making them feel a sensation akin to burning upon their skin. A few seconds later and the bright light had faded and the burning sensation had vanished from the devils' skins. When they returned their gazes to where Issei was located, they were surprised to see a glowing black ball, giving off what appeared to be a purple aura in his place. Before they could question the strange phenomena, the perfect orb began to shatter. It started at the bottom, cracking and breaking with a low crunching noise. The pieces of the orb floated towards the sky, the sphere breaking apart from the bottom to reveal the figure that was within. The figure looked similar to that of the Welsh Dragon scale mail. The jewels were in all of the right places, and the overall design seemed to be based off of it. The differences were that the jewels were not green, but purple. Instead of the signature red color signifying the Red Dragon Emperor, there was a color that resembled the night sky with no stars or moon, outer space with no sun or stars. Instead of the metal that made up the draconian armor, the figure before them was clothed with what appeared to be actual scales, each one overlapping the other to recreate the body of an actual dragon. The elegant entity before the supernatural creatures even seemed to have the neural spine of a dragon, small triangles the color of ivory stuck out of the armor, each one razor sharp and capable of slicing through flesh. Even the tail seemed to be of similar proportions to the Welsh Dragon's balance breaker. There was also an infinity symbol present on the chest plate of the suit of armor. The helmet itself was completely different, however. There was nothing that looked akin to horns, the neural spine seemed to stop just short of where the scalp would normally be. Whereas the Welsh Dragon had green eyes, the being's eyes were more intricate. In comparison to a human's eye, the sclera was a raisin purple, the iris was the same color as the rest of the armor, and the unique pupil representative of dragons was a pale violet. Balance breaker. Infinity gear, scale mail. The voice that emerged from within the helmet of the scale mail was dual-toned. One of the layers was obviously Issei's voice. The other one was not hard to figure out. Infinity gear. Ophis. Serziches exclaimed, taken so completely by surprise that he stumbled back and fell to the concrete in a very un-Satan-like manner, the rest of the Powers brass doing much the same. Even the mighty Leviathan, the strongest female devil in the underworld and referred to as a demon of pride in demonology and as a demon of envy in Christianity, could do nothing but sink to her knees and stare at the ground in a cold sweat. The symbol of infinity on his chest, the voice that Serziches and Azazel knew so well, even the name of the gear's balance breaker. There was no doubt in Azazel's mind. The governor of the fallen angels had no idea how it was possible or even how such a union was made. He was not the only individual who had these thoughts soaring through his head at Mach speed. Every single individual, save for two, were shaken at what had just transpired. The Ouroboros Dragon. Someone whispered in unfathomable disbelief. The set of draconic armor gazed in the voice's direction, falling onto the combined mass of peerages. Altogether correct, but I believe I need a new name to go with the descendants of a new dragon god. Two heavily armored arms crossed one another, the black helmet bowed in thought. It rose quickly. I'll keep it fairly simple. With grand poise, the person within the scale mail put one clawed foot in front of the other, lifted its tail off the ground slightly, and loosely outstretched its arms to both sides. Call me thus. Issei Haidu, the true black dragon god emperor of infinity. Don't fuck with me. All attention was instantly brought to the owner of the voice, who shouted out in rebellion. The voice belonged to Rias. She was standing with her legs spread at shoulder width, her teeth clenched against each other, and was glaring at Issei with utter hatred, a radiant red aura clinging to her skin. Sona, surprised by the sudden outburst of her friend, couldn't help but jump in shock. "I know I made a mistake. The worst mistake that I will probably ever make. And I regret it so much every day. But this, to ruin his memory. By taking his body. By taking his soul. I will never forgive you for this, Ophis." After this declaration of war, the intensity of the aura Rias was putting out multiplied exponentially, rising into the air like a pillar of red light. If what she was putting out earlier was equivalent to a fire, what she was putting out now far surpassed that of a wild inferno. Did she intend to raise her fist against Issei, Ophis? Sona. The massive energy output not impeding her voice in the slightest, the king of the Grimmery peerage, called out to the Citri king. "I can't take her on alone. I need your help." While this was going on, Issei was studying the tower of aura that continued to skyrocket into the air. This feels eerily familiar. Something about Ria's power seemed to be drawing him in like a moth to a flame. He was utterly fascinated that Rias had as much energy as she did. Was this her full power? It would definitely be entertaining to have a few rounds with her in his base form, but in Balance Breaker, she didn't stand a chance, and Sona wouldn't make that much of a difference. What made her think they had a chance? Issei was staring back and forth between the girl who tore his heart apart and the student council president trying to solve this puzzle that wouldn't leave him alone. It should. Ophis confirmed. Meanwhile, the Satans, Michael, and even Azazel himself glanced at the young devils in awe, wonder, and bewilderment. What could Rias possibly be talking about? "You do realize what we are up against, right?" Sona asked with a strange smile on her face. Crouching down as she loosened the collar of her school uniform with her right pointer finger, she continued. "Yet, you still have the gall to ask me that." The president of the student council glanced up at the now confirmed God Emperor. "You don't mind, do you, Issei?" "I don't. But do you really intend to fight me?" "Of course. I need to find out if you are who you say you are or you really are Ophis in Issei's form." Now that she had gotten approval from her opponent, Sona redirected her attention towards her fellow king. "You better thank me for rewriting that extraction ritual you gave me." This time, it was the Citri's aura that exploded. A vast oceanic aura shot into the air as a blue tornado, its output matching that of Rias. Sona. Seraphol, having recovered from her shock, turned to look at her little sister in amazement. The Satan never knew Sona had so much power at her disposal. In fact, when had their bi-monthly sparing ritual 2 months ago, wasn't she a lot weaker? Silence fell upon the crowd of the supernatural as they watched in wonder and confusion as the two heiresses continued to power up. Then, once again, everyone who bore witness to this strange phenomenon was hit with a bombshell of surprise as the two girls opened their mouths. "I, who shall awaken? I, who shall awaken? Am the heavenly dragon who stole the principles of domination from God. Am the heavenly dragon who took the principles of supremacy from God. I laugh at the infinite and grieve for the dream. I envy the infinite and pursue the dream. I shall become the red dragon of domination. I shall become the white dragon of supremacy. And I shall sink you to the depths of the crimson purgatory. And I shall take you to the limits of white paradise. The Garnot Drive." Well, that's it, guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. With that, take care.